Tonight, we gently open the final chapter of Master Wonhyo's long journey. This is the 8th story. Returning to the sanctuary, the completion of enlightenment. Wonhyo, the free spirit who humbled himself to walk in the lowest places of the world. Tonight, his vibrant life lays down all its burdens, returning finally to eternal stillness, to the original source. His passing was not a moment of sadness, but a peaceful completion, like a mighty river finally meeting the vast ocean and becoming one. Tonight, may you too lay down all the heavy burdens of your life right here, just as he did. Let us drift together into a world of deep, absolute peace, free from all hindrances. To ensure your complete and undisturbed sleep, the screen will slowly fade to total darkness after the first 5 minutes. Now comfortably close your eyes. Here is the translation of the provided text into English, without summary or interpretation. Sanctuary, Bodhimanda. Wonhyo realized that the spiritual power of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas had manifested a sanctuary, Bodhimanda, in this very spot. It was early autumn, where wild chrysanthemums bloomed by the mountainside. A clear wind blew and the evening sunlight shone, making it a pure sanctuary, and since the crowd of 400 people were shedding blood and tears while kneeling, it was precisely the time to preach the Dharma. Wonhyo put his palms together toward the empty sky, thought of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and prayed for the bestowal of great power. Wonhyo sat in front of Bambok's grave and opened his mouth. Since the Bodhisattva has already preached the Dharma with his body and departed, what more shall I preach? If you all cut off distracting thoughts and delusions and quietly look into your own minds, you will know that all laws, myriad dharmas, are fully equipped therein, so there is nothing to learn and nothing to obtain. However, since the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas also preached the Dharma when sentient beings requested it, this body will also sing a song to awaken the minds of the various disciples of Buddha. With this introduction, Wonhyo sang a song. Mountains, rivers, the earth, and the suffering and joy of the 4 births are creations of my mind. Beans grow where beans are planted, and red beans grow where red beans are sown. Cause and effect karma, following me, is like a shadow following the body and an echo following a sound. The pulling force of karma is stronger than a bull. In the blink of an eye, the thoughts rising in the mind, alas, become seeds of suffering and joy for 10 million kalpas. Oh, how fearful cause and effect is fearful. However, because of cause and effect, an ordinary person becomes a sage. Though heaven and earth are wide, they exist for the sake of goodness, so even a virtue as small as a hair will not be lost. Just as drops of water gather to form a great ocean, piling up small merits daily becomes great merit. The law by which this insignificant body achieves supreme enlightenment, Bodhi, is to tread the 8-fold path and accumulate goodness. Oh, how thankful, cause and effect is thankful. If not for Sakyamuni Buddha, how would we know this good Dharma? In the Trichiliocosm, without a gap even the size of a needlepoint, he cast away his life. The hardships and asceticism he suffered were for my sake. He earnestly preached the law by which a body destined for evil paths obtains infinite bliss. It is 84,000 Dharma gates. If one enters following the gate, one will not flee, losing not 1 in 100. Oh, how immeasurable is the Buddha's grace. The 80,000 Tripitaka is all Buddha Dharma. Can there be light or heavy among them? Any sentient being who accepts, holds, reads, and recites even one sutra will surely leave the evil paths and enter the Buddha land. The merit of rejoicing for even a single thought breaks the accumulated evil of 10,000 kalpas, and faith believing in a 4-line V. RS makes one a great Dharma teacher of the 3 realms. Where the scroll of the sutra exists is where the Buddha is, and the sentient being reading the sutra is the Buddha's messenger. O sentient beings, receive and read the sutras. If there are no temples, where will the Buddha Dharma stay? If not for monk and nun, who is there to transmit the Dharma? Therefore, build temples and make offerings to the holy assembly. Wonhyo raised his voice at every stanza, sang the last 2 lines 3 times, rested briefly, and then continued. To the naked and hungry, give clothes and food. Nursing the sick and helping the weak are all the practice of almsgiving, Dana. Even if one says there is no wealth, would there be no body? Being born in this body was a primal vow to cultivate the way, so is it not a true wish to use it and cast it away for the way? When all Buddhas were in their causal stages, they gave away their countries, cities, wives, and children. How can we not give this body, head, eyes, and flesh? If one offers one's life, can there be a greater almsgiving? Not killing, stealing, or committing adultery is called keeping precepts, sila. Not hating others is called patience, santi. Diligently practicing right action and right livelihood is called vigor, virya. Holding the mind firmly, detaching from all miscellaneous thoughts and delusions, and cultivating unobstructed samadhi like the clear autumn sky is called meditation, jhana. All of these are the path of Mahaprajna Paramita. Among the 10,000 practices, which one is not the 6 paramitas? Cultivate with all your might the practice you believe in according to your capacity. Which of the 84,000 Dharma gates is not the door? Sentient beings who proceed with firm faith will ultimately achieve Buddhahood. Is there anyone who does not know the great grace of parents? But who is there that knows the gratitude of the teacher? The Buddha is the fundamental teacher, and the Bodhisattvas are the great teachers. Even if you learned one thing, respect the teacher. If not for the king, on what land would we set our feet? How could we practice filial piety or cultivate the Buddha Dharma? Therefore, it is said that the ruler, the teacher, and the father are one body. When being loyal to the king, should one spare one's life? In the path of filial piety, cultivating the way is supreme. The merit accumulated by sons and daughters saves parents of many lifetimes. Eating, wearing, and using things are all the toil of sentient beings. Bow before eating a single grain of rice entering your mouth. If you cannot repay the 4 heavy graces, can you hope for paradise? Do not forget the grace of the ruler, teacher, father, and sentient beings even for a moment. The breaths you take, one by one, are vows to repay grace. Who is a sage and who is an ordinary person? Sentient and insentient beings all possess Buddha nature. Among sentient beings manifested from one mind, where is one who is not Buddha? When deluded, one is an ordinary person. Upon awakening, one is a Buddha. Hell and heaven are created by my mind. If one escapes the 3 poisons and 5 desires and cultivates supreme enlightenment, having cut off birth and death, samsara, would one fear the evil paths? Who is named as the unfortunate one in the world? It refers to the one who cannot hear the Buddha Dharma. Evil karma of many lifetimes becomes an obstacle covering this neck, throat, so even while living within the Buddha Dharma, one cannot see or hear it. The method to remove karmic obstacles is bowing and repentance at best. Keeping precepts and practicing good deeds melts karmic obstacles. The day the iron bucket-like old karma bursts in one morning, the wide Dharma realm of light, sun, and moon is freely and unobstructedly myself. The listeners are silent. Wonhyo's voice rises even higher. How does one recognize a person cultivating the Buddha way? Light shines from the face, and fragrance emits from the body. Every joint gives joy, and every step blooms flowers. Since he harbors a compassionate heart, can there be anger or hatred? Since he has cultivated pure conduct, he has cut off falsehood. If a person who has extinguished the 5 desires and defilements is respected by all the gods, devas, would the wicked hordes of demons even glance at him? Sentient beings who chant sutras and recite the Buddha's name are protected by benevolent spirits, so they do not drown when entering water and do not burn in fire. At the first thought of enlightenment, bodhicitta, of one sentient being, the Dharma realm vibrates, and even secret small deeds are recorded in heaven. What is the appearance of a house cultivating the Buddha Dharma? Can loud voices or angry looks be seen even in dreams? Since spiritual beings help and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas protect, descendants will prosper and achieve wealth and honor. What is the appearance of a country cultivating the Buddha Dharma? The people are all loyal and sons and daughters are filial. Evil spirits retreat and benevolent spirits gather, so the rain and wind are timely, the country is peaceful, and the people are secure. Since sentient beings who cultivated good karma wish to be born in this country, all superior good people gather in one place. The appearance of mountains and fields also changes face, and flying birds and crawling insects have detached from evil minds. The present world is immediately paradise. Is this not a Buddha land, requited land? Oh, how joyful, hurrah, how good! Let the Dharma drum boom and let us dance around. Finishing the song, Wonhyo danced, and the 400 people in the crowd all stood up and danced. Some clapped their hands to the beat, saying Ninunanu Niliri. Silla people like dancing. After the dance ended, Wonhyo said, "Now let us all go." Today, the funeral of Bambok's mother became an occasion, and a round of sanctuary appeared here. This is all the great vow and great spiritual power of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Now, with the intention of repaying the Buddha's grace, let us gather our voices, chant the Buddha's name, and march. And he took the lead, saying, Namu Amitabha, homage to Amitabha Buddha. The beggars followed behind Wonhyo first, responding, Namu Amitabha. The monks followed behind the beggars. Wonhyo led the crowd into the capital city. The sound of 400 people chanting Namu Amitabha together shook the city. Wonhyo led the crowd and toured through large temples like Hongyunsa and Bunwangsa, and the streets lined with houses. People all came out to the roadside to see this rare spectacle. Some people joined the procession chanting together, but others said Wonhyo was defiling Buddhism. They cursed Wonhyo whenever they met people. Because of this, some monks slipped away from this procession. The evening bells began to toll from the 880 temples in the capital. It is the bell telling the sentient beings who were weary throughout the day to rest in peace. Wonhyo stopped walking and put his palms together, and the group did likewise. Hearing the bell sound, they think of the Buddha Dharma. It had already been over half a year since Wonhyo stayed at Bambok's house. Autumn and winter passed, and spring returned. Since Bambok died, Wonhyo became the leader of the beggars. The beggars obeyed Wonhyo's words just as they listened to Bambok's words. As beggars, they even did difficult work that they would rather die than do, if Wonhyo decided it for them. The fundamental illness of beggars was a dislike of work, that is, laziness. There were various levels among beggars, but among them, a beggar named Maeleongi hated moving his body at all. He had yellowish hair, was tall, and his limbs played separately. At a glance, he looked like a lazybones, but he certainly did not lack mental function. Not only did he not lack it, but his speech was logical and he had wisdom, occasionally thinking extraordinary thoughts. However, he was incredibly lazy. Unless someone kicked him, he would sleep indefinitely and would not think to brush away flies or mosquitoes landing on his face. He originally had a house, a wife, and children, and his lineage was not low, but laziness became a disease, ruining his home and making him a beggar. "Don't you hate going to beg for rice?" When asked, he smiled broadly. He seemed to hate speaking too, so he rarely opened his mouth. If he was in a good mood, Maeleongi would answer, "I hate eating even the rice placed right under my chin, so how could I like going to beg for rice that people hate to give?" However, because he had learned letters, under Bambok, he was in charge of bookkeeping and watched the house all his life. If he occasionally went out begging, he would return once he obtained enough for one meal. It was not that he had no greed, but that he hated going around to get it. Wonhyo saw such a lazybones for the first time. If you do not break that laziness, there is a worry you will lose the human body in the next life. When Wonhyo admonished him like this, Maeleongi thought of a big python or a large rock and smiled broadly. Wonhyo made Maeleongi sweep the room in the yard and call upon Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva 1,000 times a day. Maeleongi did as ordered, but it seemed very difficult for him. If he swept once and it wasn't clean, requiring a second touch, he would just leave it. Wonhyo swept it again himself without a word. Then Maeleongi showed a very apologetic look. 1,000 chants seemed more difficult than sweeping the room and yard. It barely happened once or twice in 10 days that he filled the 1,000 times. "You can't fill that?" When Wonhyo shouted, he smiled broadly and said, "Because it is difficult to sit upright." "Fill the 1,000 times even lying down," Wonhyo commanded. However, it seemed he felt sorry to chant while lying down, so it was over a month later that he came to sit upright, twisting and turning, and fill the 1,000 times. From the time this happened, Maeleongi became less slow. He got up in the morning and did his own work. He gradually took interest in sweeping the room or yard and came to sweep cleanly even outside the gate. Wonhyo discovered that all beggars had a lazy habit, but he also knew that laziness was not the only cause for people becoming beggars. There were two important causes. One was the lack of work to do, and the second was the thought that working did not lead to living well. And on the contrary, there were people in the world who lived abundantly without working. To farm, one needs a foundation, land, capital, was the first cause, and even if I work until my bones bend, being hungry is the same, was the second cause. Once they started begging with these motives, they lost their sense of shame and spent their whole lives that way. A beggar named Dabuji was built solidly, had strength, and did well if he tried to do any work. That sort of thing, why do hard work? My father worked incessantly all his life, but when he died he was nothing but a corpse in a straw mat. Dabuji held this philosophy. Dabuji would rather beg for rice, but he did not know how to seek others' sympathy with a crying voice. Dabuji was not unaware that a beggar's weapon lay in moving people's compassion, but he thought such things were dirty. So when he went to someone's door, he would shout loudly as if the house were leaving, "A beggar has come to get rice," sounding like a command. "You rascal! A fellow with sound limbs doesn't work and goes around begging?" If a master scolded him like this, he would glare and say, "Look here. Why do you curse? Since my limbs are sound, am I not walking around to get rice? Then are you telling me to become a cripple who lies down and rots? Look here, they say there is no rich man without a beggar ancestor. If your descendants become beggars and my descendants become rich, and your descendants come to beg at my door, if my descendants utter such curses, I will break their legs even if I have to become a ghost." He confronted them like this and ended up getting rice. If they still didn't give rice, he would sit or lie down in front of the gate and shout loudly all day long. Therefore, households that knew Dabuji would shudder and quickly bring out rice as soon as they heard that sturdy voice. Wonhyo entrusted 2 children to Dabuji. He was told to feed them. Dabuji excitedly got rice to feed the children and obtained rags to sew with his own hands to clothe the 2 children. Next, there was a beggar named Nabi. This person had a clean face and at a glance looked like a young master from a noble family. He was a notorious liar and seemed unwilling to speak a single word of truth. He rejoiced seeing people deceived by his lies. He frequently lied to Wonhyo as well. Once, taking the opportunity when Nabi told a blatant lie, Wonhyo struck the top of Nabi's head with a stick. "Ouch!" Nabi screamed and put his hand to his head. "Does it hurt?" "Eh!" Nabi quickly removed the hand, touching his head and feigned innocence, saying, "Who are you trying to test? What is there to hurt about such a thing?" Before he could finish speaking, Wonhyo struck him another one like lightning. "Ouch! Ouch!" This time, it seemed fire flashed in Nabi's eyes. "Does it hurt now?" Wonhyo asked with an angry face. "Oh my." Nabi glared at Wonhyo. Still, he did not say it hurt. The name Nabi came from his skill at mimicking. Some days he acted one-eyed, some places he looked like a cripple, and in some cases he became a mute. By doing so, he moved the other party's compassion to obtain goods. His mimicking was so natural that no one could think he was faking it, and furthermore, when he launched into a tale of his plight, one could not help but shed tears. The tone of his tale sometimes mimicked a slow-witted person, sometimes a simple and foolish look, and sometimes he acted like a monk cultivating the way, showing excellent eloquence. He could make a living doing anything, but lying was a disease, and he seemed to find great fun in deceiving people while wandering as a beggar. Among his comrades, no one believed his words. Once, he had indigestion from eating something and rolled around with a stomachache, but his comrades in the same room said, "This guy is playing a prank again," and ignored him, so he suffered all day. Still, he was not the type to quit lying because of that. Wonhyo was deceived by Nabi every time. He believed what Nabi said as it was. Initially, Nabi found it fun that Wonhyo was repeatedly deceived, but gradually, realizing that Wonhyo was deceived not because he was foolish, but because he believed his words as they were, he quietly began to feel sorry. So after telling a lie to Wonhyo, he came to quickly follow up with, "No, monk, what I just said is a lie." Next, there was a person called Suri. This person had a slender body, white skin, and hands like brush tips, looking like a noble. The reason he was called Suri, eagle, was that he snatched what others had like an eagle snatching a chick, lightning fast, and feigned ignorance, so no one knew he had stolen it. He would slowly circulate around places with many people, like spectacle grounds, stealing women's hair ornaments, jewelry, things carried on men's bodies, and goods displayed in shops. However, he did not seem to have greed for wealth, so he gave what he stole to others, except for what he carried on his body. According to his comrades, he gave it to women and also to poor people. His skill in catching snakes was also due to his quick wits and dexterity. If his hand flashed, the snake's neck was already caught in his hand. Suri had many subordinates: children, women. When Suri appeared in an alley, his stooges surrounded him. Besides them, there were many beggars with various tal. A person named Kopungnu, nose music, played all sorts of music with nose sounds to make people laugh. A hunchback was famous for hunchback dancing. Some guy twitched his nose, eyes, mouth, and even ears to make funny faces and make people laugh. Some whistled very well, some were good at somersaults and tumbling, and some spun around so well that the spectators felt dizzy and trembling. These were all learned talents. But there were also those who made a living as beggars, using their naturally humorous appearance as capital. For example, a man over 40 with a beard but only the height of a 5-year-old child, a woman without a nose, one with both arms missing and only legs who painted with a brush in his foot, a person with a hunchback in front and back, one with a head like an hourglass drum and a face with eyes like needle points, one who shook his limbs trembling whenever he tried to walk, one whose neck was crooked so he walked sideways to go down the road, a bearded woman. There were all sorts of deformities. These people could obtain goods without special talents. Anyway, the 200 or so family members who became Wonhyo's subordinates were all people with a unique corner. These crowds were grotesque when taken one by one, but when tens of them gathered together and made noise, it was hard even for Wonhyo to suppress laughter. Moreover, when leaving to beg in the morning, they all painted mud and soot on their faces to draw people's attention. And before leaving the house, they practiced the talents they would show that day. And they criticized each other and laughed. Them sitting blankly in the sunny spot, dressed like this, was to think about where to go and what talent to display today. Then, when they headed to the city streets sauntering, their steps were light as if they each had some hope. When the beggars all left, Wonhyo left Meolongi at the house, took a broom and a rag, put his alms bowl in his sack, and left the house. Wonhyo found a messy house, swept the front of the gate first, wiped the pillars, and then shouted, "I have come to sweep the yard. Drain holes, outhouses, I will clean anything cleanly." At first, some were wary, asking what kind of person this was, but gradually they felt reassured and called him into the inner yard. Then Wonhyo took off his robe, swept and wiped to clean the inside of the house, obtained water to wash his hands and feet, carried his sack, put his palms together to bow to the owner, and came out. This became a beginning, and the beggars under Wonhyo gradually came to learn from Wonhyo. "We do all dirty work." The beggars advertised this in the capital city. Then people appeared who sent for Wonhyo to order where and how to clean. When the work was done, they gave food and rice. On days without work, Wonhyo led the beggars to clean the streams and streets, or repair broken roads, or sometimes clear snow. Wonhyo made the old beggars, crippled beggars, child beggars, and women beggars stay at home and not go out. And he had the able-bodied people earn and feed them. If they picked up cloth or rags, he had them wash and collect them to make clothes, and arranged other work to do while sitting at home. The old lazy habits did not fall off easily, but moved by the fact that others earned and fed them while letting them sit comfortably, they came to do their assigned tasks. After they started taking on dirty work, the world's treatment of beggars improved, because they were people invited by their own side. It was a big change that beggars who used to go where they were not called now went to places that invited them. Sometimes people building big houses asked them to prepare the site. Wonhyo hung a drum, beat it, and made them tamp the earth while chanting. Later, Nabi became the lead singer for such work. He pleased the house owner with various well-wishing remarks. Wonhyo composed the well-wishing remarks used at such times together with Nabi. The Enshin was to exude truth amidst the fun, so it would be a lesson to the listeners. After Wonhyo came to stay in Seoul, it goes without saying that Great Master Dan frequently visited Wonhyo. "Monk, won't you go to Samo Yosok one more time?" Dan joked like this. At such times, Wonyo spoke of how his relationship with Princess Yosok remained a lingering attachment in his heart. Huh, if you walk, your legs hurt, Dan said this. It means if you enjoy pleasure, you receive the punishment. Wonhyo spoke of how he left Princess Yosok when she came to find him, and also spoke of Asaga. So, don't you want to see her? Dan smiled broadly. I want to see her, so it is a worry. Wonhyo also answered like this and laughed. If so, postpone achieving Buddhahood for a few kalpas. If you want to see her to your fill and go through a few more births and deaths. Dan teased Wonhyo. None of the beggars were unaware of Great Master Dan. They thought Dan was a humorous old monk and a beggar like themselves. Sometimes when Great Master Dan visited Wonhyo, he would greet him with the respect due to a Buddha or Bodhisattva, saying, "Have small illness and small trouble, and may your edification go well." Great Master Dan often slept with the beggars and roamed around together. The beggars greatly welcomed Great Master Dan and gave him the rice and side dishes they had obtained. Sometimes, hearing Dan liked alcohol, they obtained sake leaves for him. Then Dan ate the sake leaves with his hands, excited that it tasted good. And he laughed aloud, saying, "Ho ho, isn't this old man a beggar above beggars?" Dan said he had to pay for the meal he begged, so he went to workplaces where groups of beggars were working, shook a bell, danced vigorously, or sang chants with his booming voice. Rumors spread that Great Master Dan's chanting voice could be heard in every corner, no matter from which corner he sang. This meant Great Master Dan's voice was powerful, and also that the master roamed aimlessly morning and evening, chanting. Great Master Dan walked sluggishly, but wherever he felt excited, he chanted around. Moreover, because Wonhyo's beggar troupe roamed around chanting, there was not a day without the sound of chanting in the capital city. So adults and children alike sang chants. Even if singing playfully in imitation, there was no one who did not chant. Ilching Namu Bul, Gei Sung Bul Do, reciting Namu Buddha once, one has already achieved the Buddha way. It means even a person who has chanted once has achieved the Buddha way. It goes without saying that because of this, monks staying solemnly in big temples came to harbor jealousy and complaints against Dan and Wonhyo. Moreover, Wonhyo becoming a beggar boss became a big issue among the monks, to the point that when the king held a great 10 Kings Sutra assembly, the monks united to oppose Wonhyo becoming the lecturer. The king holding the 10 Kings Sutra assembly and the Golden Light Sutra assembly at Hwangyongsa Temple was all for the purpose of conquering Baekje and Goguryeo. First, to pray for the protection of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Second, to comfort the domestic benevolent deities. Third, to pray for the repose of the fallen soldiers, and at the same time, to arouse the patriotism of the people. At this time, holding a Dharma assembly always included praying for the repose of fallen soldiers. The king hoped to request Wonhyo for the sermon on the 10 Kings Sutra or Golden Light Sutra, but since all high-ranking monks, including Jajang and Hietong, unanimously opposed Wonhyo, the king could not insist. They dared not call Wonhyo a rule-breaking monk in front of the king, but opposed Wonhyo becoming a Dharma master by saying he had become a boss of snake catchers, beggars making a living by killing, and that young monks and the general public sentiment did not favor Wonhyo. Also, some said Wonhyo was already not a monk, but a layman, so he could not preach the Dharma to the 4 groups of Buddhists in a temple. In fact, there were places in the lecture halls that rejected Wonhyo's writings. It was less severe when Wonhyo was hiding in the countryside, but seeing him enter the capital and stride down the main streets with a beggar troupe every day, it offended the monks who originally envied Wonhyo even more. However, Wonhyo was too great a force for them to trample down. It was also scary that the playful beggars were all Wonhyo's subordinates. The world thought there were all sorts of people in that beggar troupe. Later, a rumor spread that Wonhyo had become a boss of a bandit troupe. However, it was not a groundless rumor. Recently, strange bandits were rampant in the capital. They would enter big houses, steal goods, and write this phrase on the wall before leaving: Yokjiasu Muneo Hyosa. If you want to know who I am, ask Master Hyo. This happened not just once or twice. However, the government office could not touch Great Master Wonhyo, the princess's husband, and only reported this meaning to the superiors. This word finally reached the ears of great Gakon Yushin, and Yushin told the king, but the king just laughed and said, "It must be the act of someone trying to harm Great Master Wonhyo." One day, Great Master Doryang visited Wonhyo and conveyed this word. "Monk, you have become a bandit boss again." And he laughed. Wonhyo was also hearing such words from Nabi and other subordinates. There must be some reason for this. Doryang also said this to Wonhyo. "I wish I could meet those bandits once. There might be a person worthy of being called a person among them." Wonhyo replied to Doryang. The houses these bandits entered were mostly houses that received resentment from the people. Houses of rich people who became officials and extorted or did business deceiving customers to accumulate money unjustly, or were stingy and lost the heart of the neighborhood. These were the ones who met the bandits. Just when Wonhyo was curious about the bandits roaming around selling his name, Wimyong came to find Wonhyo. According to Wimyong, Princess Yosok and her brother Asaga waited for Wonhyo to return. But as autumn passed and winter passed with no news, they left Muayam for Seoul and were captured by a bandit troop on the way. Where were they captured? They were captured coming out of the entrance to Muayam. Were there no guards? The monk of Yosok Palace escorted them with 2 soldiers but fought and died. Fought with what? With swords. Wonhyo knew the swordsmanship of the Yosok Palace monk, so he thought it must be an extraordinary skill to kill him. How many were there? There were about 20. Why weren't you taken? At first, this small monk was also bound, but the bandit boss untied me and said, "You go quickly and tell Great Master Wonhyo that Barambakai is taking the princess, the baby, and the Asaga siblings." Wonhyo asked Wimyong about the appearance of the person called the bandit boss. Wimyong explained that he was 60 years old, had a lot of beard, a white face, was short, wore blue clothes, and wore a bamboo hat woven with grass leaves, looking like a dignified Taoist master. "But you mean he uses the sword well?" Wonhyo asked. At first, he stood behind and his young subordinates fought the monk, but seeing his subordinates die by the monk's sword and others being pushed back, he drew a not-so-long sword and fought lightly as if suppressing the enemy, essentially flying. "Surrender now. I hate to smear your blood on my sword." When the monk didn't listen to the boss retracting his sword and saying this, and provoked the fight, the monk was cut into 2 pieces diagonally from the right shoulder to the left flank before anyone knew when he was hit. Wimyong twitched his face recalling the situation then. "So you were trembling." At Wonhyo's words, Wimyong bowed his head in shame. "Go down and Murat, sweep the yard." Receiving Wonhyo's order, Wimyong took off his outer robe, hung it up, took a broom, and went down to the yard. Wonhyo had someone throw a live snake in front of Wimyong's feet. The snake raised its head towards Wimyong. Wimyong threw the broom, screamed "Ack," and stepped back. "Grab the head," Wonhyo shouted. Wimyong reached out desperately and followed the snake. The snake, driven into a corner, lunged at Wimyong. Wimyong grabbed the snake's neck. The snake wrapped around Wimyong's arm before he knew it. The snake's tail made a sound and trembled. Finally, the snake suffocated and went limp. Wonhyo laughed and nodded. Wimyong bowed before Wonhyo and cried. "What did you see?" Wonhyo asked Wimyong. "The monk's grace is like Mount Sumeru." Tears flowed from Wimyong's eyes. What had he been afraid of? What on earth had he cherished to be afraid? Wimyong felt as if the iron chains binding his body had snapped. There was nothing scary in the world. He felt free and unhindered. Wonhyo entrusted Boensa Temple to Wimyong and left to find Baramboki. Baramboki was commonly called Baram, wind, and was a famous bandit throughout the country. All big mountains below Tabaxan were his lairs, so no one knew his dwelling. It seemed there were many of Baram's stooges within the capital city, but outsiders could not know who was who. Wonhyo left blindly. However, Wonhyo had this confidence, that Baram taking the princess's party and releasing Wimyong to convey the message to Wonhyo meant he surely wanted to meet Wonhyo. If so, if Wonhyo roamed around, he would surely meet Baram's stooge. Wonhyo hung gourds around his waist like in his wandering days, called himself Sosong Geosa, layman Soseong this time, and walked wherever his feet led him. He thought if Baram took the princess's party, he would not have gone far. So Wonhyo walked towards Ilseonju. Wonhyo arrived at the border of Abiagul in the spring breeze listening to spring bird sounds and stayed at a tavern in Okmiwon. Since leaving Seoul, Wonhyo met one or two companions every day. They were all beggar monks dressed like Wonhyo, traveling to see the mountains and rivers taking advantage of the spring season. They all knew arts and letters, so when they met a scenic spot, they sang, wrote poems, and danced. Then they parted after a day or two. On the day Wonhyo entered Okmiwon, he also traveled with a beggar monk. He played the willow leaf flute very well, playing over 70 tunes with a single willow leaf. Wonhyo sang and danced to that tune. He was the most interesting person Wonhyo had met during that time. He was indeed an extraordinary man of arts. This person was similar in age to Wonhyo, so they became friends without reserve in a day. However, of course, Wonhyo did not say his name, and that person likewise, and they did not ask each other's names. It was that flute player who invited him to Okmiwon and decided on this house as lodging. Entering the tavern, the two drank and played late. Borrowing a flute from the owner's house, the flute player played the flute and Wonhyo played the geomungo, playing languidly. "Isn't this the joy of life?" the flute player said as he put down the flute. "Indeed it is," Wonhyo answered, feeling a kind of pressure from the flute player. "Come, let's bet the meal price on who falls asleep first. Let's sleep now." The flute player said this. "Let the person who falls asleep later carry the luggage of the person who falls asleep first," Wonhyo said. The flute player's eyes flashed once, and he laughed loudly. "Ha ha." Wonhyo pulled a wooden pillow and lay down. Waking up after sleeping well in his drunkenness, Wonhyo found neither the flute player nor Wonhyo's luggage. Wonhyo laughed. After daybreak, he saw characters written on the window. "Yok jiasu, muneo hyosa, il seong cho jeok, bongryong re ui." "If you want to know who I am, ask Master Hyo." At one sound of top, he grass flute. The phoenix and dragon come to dance. Wonhyo obtained breakfast and left Okmiwon. He was heading for Yongchunsa Temple on Babongsan Mountain. When Wonhyo entered the entrance of Yongchunsa Temple, it was already dusk, and the evening bell sound rang faintly from the forest. People with towels tied around their heads carrying loads that seemed to be rice were going up towards the temple, and some were coming down carrying empty A-frames. At a glance, one could see this was a big temple with many people. Wonhyo sat by the stream, washed his face and feet, and went up along the stream. Outside the guest room Pandobang, there were about 20 pairs of straw shoes, and the sound of iron signaling evening meal was heard everywhere. Wonhyo first peeked into the guest room. A group with protruding cheekbones, narrow foreheads, and bulging eyes sat around playing Ute, a board game. Seeing Wonhyo peeking, everyone turned their eyes toward Wonhyo. Wonhyo thought those eyes were unsavory and they were a bandit troop. "Who are you looking for?" an elderly one among them asked. The others continued the Ute game. "Who is there for a sightseeing beggar monk to find? The sun is setting and I am hungry, so I am thinking of getting a spoonful of rice and staying the night." Wonhyo answered like this, pushed his buttocks into the room, sat on the threshold, and untied his shoes. When Wonhyo tried to enter the room after taking off his shoes, there was someone blocking Wonhyo from entering by turning his buttocks toward the door. Wonhyo, as if not seeing it, pushed the person with his knee and entered. That person tumbled forward, kicked by Wonhyo's knee. "Why do you kick a person?" The guy jumped up and confronted Wonhyo. "Why did you block my front?" Wonhyo retorted. That person raised his arm to hit Wonhyo, but Wonhyo caught the descending wrist and slapped the person's cheek. "Why do you hit a person?" The person confronted him again. "Did I hit? Didn't his own hand hit him? Didn't the whole assembly see?" Fire flashed in Wonhyo's eyes. Everyone stood up angrily. "Sit down, everyone. What will you do if you stand up? Let's play Ute." Wonhyo sat alone, pulled the Ute board to his side, threw the Ute sticks so they touched the ceiling, jumped up, slapped his two knees, and shouted like thunder, "Is it Ute or Mo?" Everyone was suppressed by Wonhyo's energy and stared blankly. Wonhyo threw the Ute sticks 3 or 4 times alone, then pulled the wrist of the guy who got slapped to seat him, saying, "Come on, sit down. Let's play Yut. A man shouldn't be like that over such a thing." Sitting him down, Wonhyo gave him 2 Ute sticks. "Here, play, let's compete." The person threw the Ute sticks as if he couldn't resist. It was Do. Wonhyo threw Ute. I play first. Wonhyo threw the ute sticks vigorously. The sticks that went up to the ceiling hit the sticks on the floor, making a loud sound and becoming mo. Next was Gay. Put in mo Gay. The slapped friend finally seemed to gain energy and threw the ute sticks. It's mo, the group shouted. Clearly, the group considered Wonhyo the enemy. As Wonhyo's throw became mo, a friend cleared it away and sat forward. He had prominently protruding cheekbones and eyes turned up like an inverted figure eight, giving him a very fierce appearance. Look here, friend. The cheekbone sat close to Wonhyo holding the ute sticks and said, Since we are playing ute anyway, let's make a bet. What bet shall we make? Wonhyo asked. If you win, you eat dinner, and if you lose, you skip dinner. At Cheekbone's words, the group responded, That's good. And they squatted down to listen to what words would come out of Wonhyo's mouth. That won't do, Wonhyo flatly refused. Why won't it do? Cheekbones glared. A bet must be equal for both sides. If we do as you say, only I suffer loss. So let's do this. If I lose, I will skip dinner tonight, and if you lose, you skip. How is the at? At Wonhyo's proposal, several people looked at each other. All right, let's do that. This time a dark shorty sat forward. He winked at the people next to him. It meant if Wonhyo lost, they would starve him, and even if they lost, they would eat. Do it, the group agreed. Shorty lifted the yut board to shake off all the pieces, snatched the yut sticks from Cheekbone's hand and gave 2 sticks to Wonhyo. I will use the pieces. A skinny guy pushed Cheekbones and sat forward. Though he had no flesh, his bones looked hard as if made entirely of iron. To Wonhyo, who only saw cripples or dull slowpokes, this energetic group, though having an evil air, was appealing, so inwardly he was secretly pleased. Wonhyo played first and got do. Shorty got geol. Wonhyo threw moge, caught Shorty's piece, and threw 4 consecutive mogeols, baking out 3 pieces and sending the last one to the geol position. The skinny guy tried to use tricks in moving the pieces, but there was no time for tricks. Shorty gritted his teeth, squatted, gathered the yut sticks, and aimed carefully. Come on, isn't there a mo? Someone cheered from behind. Shorty screamed ack and threw the yut sticks. It's mo! A shout went up. He threw again. It's mo! People were all panting. However, the next one was do. Shorty threw down the yut sticks as if dumbfounded. He used the 2 mo's to move the internal piece to guard the return of Wonhyo's piece, and attached 1 do to create a base to follow from behind. Wonhyo's last piece would exit with 2 mos and a gay. The yut sticks were in Wonhyo's hand. Although there were some fluctuations, eventually Wonhyo won the game. The group glared at Wonhyo, gritting their teeth. Best 2 out of 3, play 2 more times. Cheekbones grabbed the yut sticks and sat forward. No. Would a real man go back on his word? I lost. Shorty sat back. Food came in. A large wooden bowl was filled with steaming white rice, and a black earthenware bowl had soup still making a boiling sound. The room was filled with the fragrance of rice and soup. People automatically took out their own alms bowls from the shelf and placed them in front. First, a large water jar circulated, and everyone received a bowl of water. Next, a person holding a large spatula carried the rice bowl around and scooped rice. He measured the rice this way and that with the large wooden spatula, scooped 1 scoop into the bowl, and the fresh rice fragrance pierced the nose. Then he put it into the next person's bowl. The soup was the same. He scooped a generous amount of soup with a large wooden ladle and poured it into the soup bowl. Then the smell of vegetable soup wafted up strongly. There was no alms bowl in front of Wonhyo. Wonhyo's bowl had been stolen by the grass flute the night before. You don't even have an alms bowl? The monk distributing food said. My chief disciple carried my alms bowl and already arrived at Yongchunsa. Wonhyo answered naturally. Even for a beggar monk, you don't carry a rice bowl? Tsk! He looked Wonhyo up and down and said, Bring out even those gourds hanging on your waist. Even a beggar needs to eat to live, no? The person scooping rice held out his hand. Scoop your own food and put that rice bowl and soup basin in front of me. Put the water jar in front of me too, Wonhyo said. The person distributing rice opened his eyes wide and asked, Why is that? And put the rice bowl he was about to carry away in front of Wonhyo. He was a monk. Earlier, I played a rice-starving bet ute with these people. Only the winner eats and the loser doesn't. But I won and these people lost. So, I am the only one to eat rice, and those friends over there only get to smell it and drink water. Seeing as these gentlemen seem to be heroes of the world, surely a real man wouldn't go back on his word. Look here, put that soup bowl here too. Put the water jar here. Wonhyo pointed to the spot with his hand. The monk the soup bowl placed it where Wonhyo told him to. However, the monk holding the water jar looked around the group as if hesitating. The group only glared and said nothing. "Why don't you put it down? Put it down when I say so," Wonhyo shouted. It was a loud voice that made the quiet room ring. The monk put down the water jar in confusion. Wonhyo held up the rice bowl on his head and recited 2 phrases. "I make an offering to the 3 jewels. May sentient beings all be full." Then, as if talking to himself, "Oh, what merit have I accumulated today to receive this rice?" The Buddha underwent infinite kalpas of hardship for the sake of sentient beings, yet ate only 1 meal a day. What have I done to eat rice to my fill in the morning? Oh, fearful! How much is the toil of sentient beings and the toil of heaven and earth until this single grain of rice becomes cooked rice and enters my mouth? Eating rice without working is like sucking the blood of sentient beings. Thief, thief, I am a thief. It is said one became an ox to repay the debt of eating a single ear of wheat without the owner knowing. How much is the sin of eating this bowl of rice without paying? Ah, scary, scary. Wonhyo trembled as if seeing something scary before his eyes. The group was just staring blankly at Wonhyo's behavior. They seemed to have forgotten the steam rising from the rice bowl in front and the smell of rice. Wonhyo was silent for a moment, then opened his mouth again to sing. Rather than receive the body of a sentient being for 1,000 kalpas by eating the toil of sentient beings without merit, I would rather starve and let this body die. He sang this twice. The group was enraptured by the sound. They had never heard such a sound in their lives, nor had they ever thought of such things. They had become thieves with the greed to fill their desires without effort, because they had much greed and disliked work. Wonhyo's muttering pierced the lungs and liver of the group, phrase by phrase. Wonhyo continued his soliloquy. "Thinking that I have no merit to receive rice, even smelling this savory rice smell feels like cutting my chest. While farmers working incessantly due to last year's famine sustain their lives boiling grass roots, this white rice is overly gracious." Wonhyo lifted the rice bowl high, held it toward the outside of the door, and said, "Starving sentient beings, smell the rice at least." The steam from the rice bowl rose into the air as if leaving for the starving sentient beings. Wonhyo put down the rice bowl, then lifted the soup bowl high and said, "Here, smell the soup too. This year, may the 5 grains be abundant so you can eat your fill." Then he put it back in its place, grabbed a fistful of rice with his hand, and said, "I speak to the assembly. My heart wants to not eat this rice and starve to death, but life is tough, so I eat this rice. I came a long way all day and am very hungry. However, I swear to you all, while this rice enters my stomach and digests, I will dissolve all evil minds in my heart, and from tomorrow morning when the sun rises, I will become a person who does anything for sentient beings. If these words become a lie and I become a person who steals from sentient beings again after eating this rice, may the rice I eat become alls grain by grain to pierce my body forever and become unquenchable flames to burn this body in Avicii hell. May the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the gods of heaven and earth, and the various heroes here prove my vow." And he put the rice in his fist into his mouth and chewed it deliciously. After eating rice with his fist, he lifted the soup bowl, drank the soup, and after doing this several times, thankful, seeing my belly full, new energy comes out. And this time he lifted the water jar and drank in gulps. Then Wonhyo smacked his lips in satisfaction. Only then did the people come to their senses and look down at their rice bowls. The skinny guy blinked his eyes, as if scheming something, but Shorty remained perfectly still with his mouth shut tight. He was determined to keep a real man's word. Other people glanced at each other, only watching for cues. If anyone ate first, they would follow and eat. The monks distributing rice and soup just stared blankly at this strange spectacle. The sound of swallowing saliva became louder and more frequent in every corner. Stomachs were hungry, appetites were aroused, and saliva flowed incessantly from mouths. People's eyes began to gather on Wonhyo. They gulped down saliva and looked at Wonhyo. It was because they felt this problem would only be solved if some words fell from his mouth. In the middle of the room, Ute sticks were still lying, and two pieces that had stopped while following Wonhyo's horse on two paths were still on the board. One was a nalgwing and one was a sokyut. Wonhyo pretended not to see the gazes of the people, placed his two hands on his knees, and swayed his body leisurely. Should I eat after swearing that I will not produce evil minds and will work well after eating this rice? Cheekbones thought this, but the words did not come out of his mouth. Wonhyo thought it unexpected. He was surprised and pleased that these people kept their word this much. He wanted to say, "Come, eat quickly," but he wanted to see how much self-control and restraint they had, and how they would eventually solve this problem. He also worried they might commit violence against him, but if that happened, it seemed he could know their true hearts and give them an opportunity to realize the way. The sound of them swallowing saliva grew louder. Adam's apples were seen moving up and down. They moved their empty mouths. They looked down at the rice and then looked at the empty air. It seemed they couldn't bear to look at the delicious rice. A growling sound came from Cheekbone's stomach. Cheekbones closed his eyes tight and swallowed saliva once. Shorty sat quietly looking at the empty air with his eyes focused like a meditating monk. Wonhyo could not bear it anymore. Continuing this scene longer seemed to go against compassion. Being hungry was difficult, but having food in front and not eating was even more difficult. The skinny guy moved his Adam's apple a few times and blinked his eyes this way and that. However, no one responded to his signal. Shorty rather glared at the skinny guy. Wonhyo was even more grateful for that. "I will say a word to everyone." Wonhyo bowed politely with his forehead to the ground and spoke. "You are indeed people of loyalty. Since you keep the words spoken in jest so sincerely, it is clear you are people born with vows to do many good deeds in this life after cultivating the way in previous lives. Now this person has one request to ask of you." "What is it?" "Even if you decided to skip dinner, please stop and eat. Even if you eat now, I think it is not breaking the promise. One more request is to think gratefully that this rice is made of the blood and sweat of many sentient beings, and by eating this rice may your bodies be strong and energetic, so you help many sentient beings, repaying the four heavy graces, ruler, father, sentient beings, teacher, above, and saving the three paths of suffering, hell, animals, hungry ghosts below, becoming noble elders." He briefly lifted his head to look around the group and said, "Sitting in one place is said to be a connection of 1,000 kalpas, so please listen to this person's words." And he put his head to the floor once more and sat upright. A look of revival returned to people's faces. "Let's eat." This was Cheekbones. "Then I eat." This was Shorty. "You eat some more too." This was the skinny guy. Hands busily moved back and forth from rice to mouth. Sounds of chewing rice and drinking soup were heard. Everyone panted for breath. The rice eaten at this time was especially tasty. It was rice eaten after enduring hunger and the desire to eat, so it became honey as it entered the mouth and blood as it entered the stomach. Wonhyo quietly watched them eat. There were no distracting thoughts there. The entire mind was concentrated on the mouth. The body became entirely a mouth. Wonhyo thought he witnessed how strong the instinct to live was. Moreover, he could see they were vigorous young people and people with unusually high greed. Their eyes were red, trying to eat more rice and soup before others. In an instant, they ate everything without leaving a grain of rice or a drop of soup. Not a drop of water remained in the jar. As if wishing to eat more, they smacked their empty lips and cleaned their bowls by licking them with their tongues. The skinny guy was belching from overeating. Even at night, grass flute was not seen. Wonhyo was curious, but he couldn't ask them, nor could he leave blindly to find him. Wonhyo interpreted Il Seong Cho Jok Bong Ryong Re Wi as grass flute's words to find him at Yongchunsa on Bibongsan. Moreover, seeing the appearance of the group gathered in Yongchunsa's guest room, it was clear they were bandit minions. If so, there would surely be a way to meet the flute player, and then he would know about the princess and the Asaga siblings, so he laid down with a wooden pillow along with the others. They were talking about playing with women, mixing truth and fiction. None seemed to have their own wives. Perhaps they made up stories and found satisfaction in telling them to others. That bitch, she wouldn't listen no matter what, so I choked her neck tight. There was a guy saying such things. Wonhyo thought they might all be people who had killed quite a few. Beggars usually had greed but lacked the energy to execute it. Therefore, when they saw something they liked, they only stared and envied. But these people, when they saw something covetable, would make it theirs immediately, even using knives or clubs. It wasn't that they didn't steal others' things secretly when unseen, but these people were satisfied only when they overcame some resistance to seize the object. Therefore, what they despised most was a petty thief, and if a petty thief caught their eye, they wouldn't leave him alone. They called themselves tigers and petty thieves cats. Because they had to overcome great resistance to achieve their purpose, they formed solid unity under one boss. They obeyed the superior's orders and had loyalty to avenge a comrade. Wonhyo also heard many stories of the bandit nation. Just as there is only one king in Silla, there was one great boss in the Silla bandits. The world knew him as Barambaki. Below the great boss, there were several levels of small bosses, just like the organization of a country. Wonhyo wanted to investigate the internal affairs of this bandit nation on this occasion. According to what he heard, Goguryeo also had such a bandit nation, and the country sometimes selected capable ones among bandits to make them generals, and such generals fought bravely. Also, Goguryeo reportedly used beggars to send them into Silla and Baekje as spies. However, he hadn't heard of a small country like Silla using such things. Wonhyo thought about whether he could use that beggar troop and this bandit troop for state affairs, and also thought that if a guy like that shorty entered the Buddha way, he would surely become a powerful monk and do great things. As the people's obscene talk gradually decreased, people's snoring increased one by one. The sound of passing the night was heard. They snored powerfully too. Everyone fell asleep. The skinny guy seemed to go out to pee, but fell asleep as soon as he came in. It was dark, so people's faces weren't visible, only the sound of breathing and snoring. You rascal, some talked in their sleep. Even for those practicing asceticism, past memories lead to scary dreams. The dreams of those committing murder and robbery could not be peaceful, so their sleeping forms were not peak. Some made choking sounds. Some made sounds of being chased by something scary. Ung. Wonhyo sat up quietly and chanted Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. Brighten the darkness of their minds with your light, and touch their suffering souls with your hand to give peace. Wonhyo prayed. When Wonhyo was chanting Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva like this, suddenly the sound of a flute was heard. It was clearly the tune heard at Okmiwon. Wonhyo firmly vowed to save the group lying in the room and stepped outside. It was pitch black. The darkness of spring is originally severe, and being in the forest, it was truly like a lacquer bucket. Moreover, seeing the distance blurry, there seemed to be fog. Wonhyo moved his steps toward the flute sound. After going some distance, Wonhyo sang the song sung at Okmiwon to the flute. The flute sound stopped briefly. Wonhyo also stood tall. After a while, the flute sound came again. Wonhyo sang again to that tune. This time the flute sound did not stop but continued more vigorously. Wonhyo walked turning around rocks and avoiding trees. The sound seemed close but remained the same distance no matter how much he walked. Wonhyo climbed onto a ridge. There he let out a long sound. At that moment, a light flashed from the direction Wonhyo was looking. The flute sound stopped and the light began to move. Wonhyo walked towards the light. It seemed he had come 10 li from the temple. Finally, the light stopped in front of Wonhyo. I am Piri Flute. Piri lifted the lantern to illuminate his face and Wonhyo's face. I am sorry sound. Wonhyo answered like this. Ha! Piri laughed first. He was dressed as a layman wearing a monk's robe. Ha! Wonhyo laughed too. I thought the master would come tomorrow or the day after. Fancy you coming today. Saying this, he lifted the lantern and led the way. Wonhyo followed behind. Walking, Piri asked Wonhyo about Yongchunsa. Wonhyo told him about the betting Ute game and eating rice, and Piri looked back at Wonhyo and laughed aloud. However, he did not ask if they were all his subordinates. Crossing a few valleys, they came out on a road and gradually went down to a lower place. The moon rose. The place Wonhyo was led to was a large village. A quite large stream flowed in front of the village, glistening in the moonlight, and tiled houses lined the village. It is a humble place. Piri knocked on a big gate. With a creak, the gate opened and a dog ran out. The dog looked up at Wonhyo once, then looked at Piri, wagged its tail, and led the way. They entered the guest quarters. It was lavishly furnished. Wonhyo's sack and gourds were placed there. After the greetings were over and they sat down, Piri laughed and said, "Bringing that luggage first was the hospitality, ha. The princess, the baby, and the Asaga siblings are all comfortable, so let's meet tomorrow morning and rest comfortably tonight." Saying this, he laid out brilliant bedding and went inside. Wonhyo slept well and woke up. The window was bright and sparrows were chirping. Wonhyo found it funny thinking the Yongchunsa guest room gang would have woken up and made a fuss seeing Wonhyo gone. When washwater and the breakfast table came out, Piri came out wearing not a monk's robe but secular clothes. It was all jade-colored silk. Dressed like that, he looked like a noble. When he wore a monk's robe, he looked like a layman, and when he wore a bamboo hat and a coat, he looked like a Taoist. Whatever he wore suited him, and whatever he dressed as looked plausible. He had a jade-white face with black sideburns shaped like swallow wings, and his eyes had a compassionate gleam. Though they hadn't exchanged names yet, they were already friendly. Wonhyo's table was strictly vegetarian, while Piri's table had meat dishes. The two ate silently at first. Piri glanced at Wonhyo as if wanting to say something. Wonhyo also wanted to ask about the princess's party, but couldn't find an opportunity. "Great Master Wonhyo." Piri opened his mouth first to ask. "I am not Great Master Wonhyo, but layman Soseong." Wonhyo answered like this. "Well, whether great master or layman, the person is one person, no?" Piri stopped his spoon and said this. "That is so. Originally I was Great Master Wonhyo, but now I am layman Soseong." Wonhyo answered like this while drinking soup. It was wild vegetable soup. "It might be so, but I hate calling you layman Soseong. I hate losing one Great Master Wonhyo. That aside, you must have guessed what kind of person I am and where this is by now." Piri smiled. "Since you play the flute well, I named you Piri, flute, and I think this village is a lair where people like you live." At Wonhyo's words, Piri suddenly changed color, threw his spoon on the table, and glared at Wonhyo, saying, "No, what kind of talk is that? Lair? The master is senile. Don't you know the word lair, sogul? A place where flying beasts live is called so, nest, and where crawling beasts live is called gul, den. So generally where beasts gather and live is called a lair. Since bandits are viewed as beasts, the place where bandits gather is called a lair. Just as where people gather is a village, where spirits gather is a shrine, and where monks gather is a temple. If I spoke the truth, you have no reason to be angry. Then what should I call it?" Wonhyo smiled broadly. Piri withdrew his anger slightly and straightened his body to assume dignity. "Do you know why the master came here?" "There is no reason I don't know why I came. I came to find my family and disciples captured by a bandit troop." "Came to find? You think you can take them as you please?" Piri shut his mouth as if to say it won't happen. "Who can stop me from taking my wife and my disciples?" Wonhyo's voice was loud. "Great Master Wonhyo may have great spiritual power and a high name, so you roam the world without hindrance. But once captured in a bandit's lair, it will be difficult to be released easily." Ha. There was a time Princess Yosok locked me up in Yosok Palace for 3 days, but in this vast Dharma realm, there will be no one who can stop Wonhyo again. Ha. After laughing to his heart's content, Wonhyo beat the table with chopsticks to the rhythm in excitement and sang long, "Il che mue in, il do chol sang sa." A person unhindered by anything exits birth and death in a single path. Meanwhile, Piri remained motionless like a fossil, not even moving his eyeballs. After singing to his heart's content, Wonhyo poured water into his rice bowl and scooped large spoonfuls into his mouth. Piri felt unbearable insult at Wonhyo's audacious manner. "Even if I kill Wonhyo, killing or saving Wonhyo depends on my hand." Piri threatened like this. However, the voice could not stretch out. Wonhyo stared at Piri for a moment, then, "Ha!" He laughed loudly, causing the rice and chewed side dishes in his mouth to spray out, hitting Piri's face and whole body countless times. Some stuck and some fell to the floor. Piri could not calm his mind, looking like someone spun around. Piri, who was confident that he had experienced all sorts of hardships and polished his body and mind to the limit, was facing such a case and such a person for the first time. After laughing for a while, Wonhyo said, "Oh, all that rice stuck to your face, too bad." And he thrust his arm out to wipe Piri's face from forehead to chin. Piri struck Wonhyo's arm hard enough to break it, but Wonhyo's arm returned to its place in an instant, and Piri's arm hit his own table, overturning the soup bowl, wetting his knees, and filling the room with the smell of beef. Piri felt even more trampled by Wonhyo. "Gee, with that skill, how would you kill Wonhyo? Trying to hit Wonhyo, you hit your own soup bowl. It's a good thing others didn't see, or you would have faced great embarrassment. Come, quickly ask for another bowl of soup and rice. Not just soup, tell them to reset a table. Oh, rice from my mouth splattered all over that side dish bowl." Wonhyo resumed eating the rice he was eating. "Really? Do you think you will leave this village alive?" Piri, seeming to barely recover his senses, glared at Wonhyo like drawing a bow. "Oh, saying such foolish things again. That makes me burst into laughter. If I want to go out alive, I go out alive. If I want to go out dead, I go out dead. Who says they kill or save me? Haven't you heard fire cannot burn, water cannot drift? Even heaven cannot do anything to me. So what can 10 million ordinary men with greed, anger, and ignorance do to me? You don't know if your bandit subordinates are thousands or 10,000s, but all good spirits of heaven and earth follow me, and all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the boundless Dharma realm are on my side. Unless I lose the way, as long as I proceed fairly and squarely on the Buddha way, what can heaven and earth do to me, even if they unite? Piri, if you open your eyes properly, you will see a Vajra warrior holding a terrifying club guarding my side." At Wonhyo's words, Piri realized goosebumps rising on his body. From earlier, he felt something pressing and hitting his body, making it difficult to resist Wonhyo. Piri wasn't unaware of words like what Wonhyo just said, but he thought such words were all empty talk. He believed wealth, alcohol, and women brought joy to people, and swords killed people. Piri also feared ghosts. He believed mountain spirits existed in mountains, water spirits in water, and various household spirits in homes. So even when leaving for a big robbery, he offered sacrifices selectively. Calves where calves were due, pigs where pigs were due, chickens where chickens were due, cows, steamed rice cakes, etc. They believed spirits would listen if they offered sacrifices like this. However, they did not consider that the ghost receiving a bandit sacrifice would be a bandit ghost and never a benevolent spirit. They did not know that sacrifices received by benevolent spirits are those offered by good-hearted people. The scariest thing Piri heard in Wonhyo's words was that all good spirits of heaven and earth were on his side. If that was true, it seemed like a big deal. When Wonhyo finished eating and pushed the table away, Piri smiled and asked, "Did the master not eat bandit's rice?" "How could I have eaten bandit's rice? I received an offering from good sentient beings." Wonhyo answered like this. "What are you saying? You deny it even after eating rice just cooked in my house?" Piri counterattacked. "Can a grain of rice be made by a bandit's hand? It is all made by good sentient beings sweating on the king's land to become a benefit of heaven and earth." Wonhyo answered like this, paused briefly, and said, "Can a grain of rice enter a bandit's mouth? It fed you waiting for the day, saying, maybe today, for bandits to enter the right path. If you do not repent and turn to good even after waiting enough, the sword of law in the country will move, and the fire of hell in the afterlife will be prepared to burn you. But perhaps today is that one day." Saying this, Wonhyo stared piercingly at Piri. No one knows exactly what Piri is. The world calls him lightning, and also Piri, flute, as Wonhyo calls him. The reason he is called lightning is that he flashes in the east and flashes in the west. He flashes, but his trace cannot be found. The world believes he uses transformation magic, and some say because he is a son born between a human and a ghost, sometimes he manifests a human form to be seen, and sometimes he becomes a ghost to move unseen. Piri is the strategist of the great boss Baram, Wind. In other words, he is Zhuge Liang. The leaders commanding tens of thousands of bandits in all of Silla are Baram and Lightning. Baram is already an old man nearing 60, but no one has seen his appearance. His deeds are clearly seen, but his body is not, so he is called Baram, wind. Piri could transform into a young man, an old man, and various forms, and had the talent to change even his voice. Moreover, his body was said to be swift as a swallow. Not only his body, but in wits, he had never lost to anyone. Attacking large towns was all from Piri's schemes, and luring Wonhyo this time was also Piri's scheme. Though subjected to countless government suppression campaigns, he always outwitted the government troops and escaped completely. Such a Piri was played by Wonhyo like a game of jacks during the meal today. Even if he produced a scheme, there was nowhere to apply it, and even if he tried to rise and fight, Wonhyo gave no such opening. Wonhyo seemed like an unapproachable cliff. Because he had thought Wonhyo would be easy, Piri's shock was even greater. Indeed, a giant. Piri inwardly admired Wonhyo. However, he also thought, no matter if it's Wonhyo, what talent could he use to escape after being caught in this lair? At this time, a voice was heard from outside, reporting to the strategist. Wonhyo smiled at the word strategist. "Oh, what is it?" Piri opened the window and answered in a dignified voice. "The general orders to guide the guest in." The person wearing a red coat and a felt hat reported. Wonhyo knew this group had created ceremonial forms and was mimicking what was done in government offices. "Oh, report that we are coming immediately." Piri sent the messenger back with these words and urged Wonhyo, "Come, get up." "Where are we going?" Wonhyo asked. "We are going to where our general is." Piri tried to show authority. "By general, do you mean the one called Baram?" "That is so. He is the one the world calls Baram. There is nowhere under heaven he does not go. But just as shaking tree branches are seen, but the wind's body is not, our general is called Baram by the world because his traces are seen, but his body is not." Wonhyo followed Piri. Coming out of the village, they went up a small stream for a while to a small pass, and over the pass was a large house with old pine trees and zelkova, ash, and scholar trees with fresh fluttering leaves. Even at a glance, it seemed to be an old house several hundred years old. "That is the house," Piri told Wonhyo. "Oh, a very old house." Wonhyo stopped at the top of the pass. "Old indeed. It is a house older than our Silla nation. It has been there since the time of Sangaganga, Jinhan," Piri said boastfully. "Since Sangaganga?" Wonhyo was surprised. "Yes, I will tell you the history of the bandit nation, so listen." Piri chose a rock and told Wonhyo to sit. At the mention of the bandit nation's history, Wonhyo smiled broadly. Piri began the explanation. "The existence of bandits in the world is just like the existence of monks in the world." This was the first word. "What does that mean?" Wonhyo asked, truly surprised. "Great Master Wonhyo doesn't know that far." Piri laughed as if he had won once. "Bandits and monks are the same?" Wonhyo recited it once more. "Listen. Among people in the world there are many intermediates. They dislike bandits, dislike monks, but sometimes think of stealing, sometimes think of becoming a monk, yet end up living their lives neither as monks nor bandits. These are the intermediates. The world is made of such intermediates." Piri watched Wonhyo to see if he agreed or disagreed. "Right. Your words are correct." Wonhyo expressed agreement. "But if by chance one steals first, one becomes a bandit. And if one acts as a monk first, one becomes a monk. Once one steals, one becomes a bandit for life. Stealing makes one a sinner. Being a sinner makes one flee. Fleeing leaves no choice but to steal. Monks are the same, no? Great Master Wonhyo married Princess Yosok and acts as a layman. But is the world like that? You are still Great Master Wonhyo, so bandits and monks are the same. Ha! Isn't it so, Master? Regarding this, Wonhyo did not express agreement, so he changed the subject. By the way, what does it mean that the history of the bandit nation is older than the Silla nation? Ah, you don't know that either. There are bandit bees among bees, and bandit ants among ants. From the time people started living in this world, bandits also started existing. When Mahan, Jinhan, and Byeonhan were formed, the bandit nation was already formed. Speaking of the first boss of bandits in our Silla nation, it was a man named Mangnan. According to tradition, he studied under the same teacher as the founder Park Hyos. Then when Park Hyos became king, Mangnan went into the mountains and became a bandit boss. When the founder asked him to come out and govern the country together, Mangnan replied, "You govern the good people, I will govern the evil people," and did not go out. Indeed, that makes sense. If there is no one to govern those many bandits, can a nation stand? Isn't it so, Master? Perry stopped talking again and watched Wonhyo's reaction. Govern bandits? How does one govern them? Do bandits also have laws and a way? Should someone like Great Master Wonhyo say such things? Don't you monks also receive the rule of Buddha's law, even if not the king's law? Bandits are the same. Bandits also have a bandit's way and bandit's law, which is why innocent people live on and the bandit nation endures for 10,000 generations, no? Piri boasted. Let's hear that bandit's way. Wonhyo raised his eyebrows as if interested. I will tell you the bandit's way, listen. First, do not steal from the poor. So, Wonhyo closed his eyes to listen attentively. Second, do not touch the country's things. Right, that is loyalty, Wonhyo replied with eyes closed. Third, do not steal the wealth of upright people. That is righteousness. Fourth, do not steal from a sleeping person. What is that? Wonhyo opened his eyes. Didn't it say not to kill sleeping beasts? Killing with discrimination. Right, it could be what you monks call compassion, but we consider such acts as petty thievery and despise them greatly. Piri showed genuine contempt for petty thieves on his face. Next, Wonhyo urged. Fifth, do not steal a load someone is carrying alone. Next, do not rape a married woman. Do not rape a chaste widow. Are there only those 6? Wonhyo opened his eyes. A magpie chirped on an old pine branch. How is it? The laws of our bandit nation are quite something. These are laws passed down for thousands of years. Piri said this and stroked his beard. Then what goods do you steal? Wonhyo looked at Piri's eyes. They were very shining eyes. Officials who receive resentment from the people, rich men who receive resentment from the people, and things from people who have so much that taking a little is okay. We target these. Once we target, they cannot escape. Piri showed authority. Do you also kill people? We surely kill those who hinder what we intend to do, but we do not kill innocent lives, and on the contrary, there are many cases where we help the poor and pitiful. Steal to help? Wonhyo laughed. That's right, we don't intend to become rich. It is to take from the haves to feed the have-nots. A butterfly flew in and landed on Piri's hat. What do you do to those who break the law? Wonhyo asked. If light, rebuke. If heavy, flogging. If heavier, expulsion and circulating a notice so no one contacts them. If very heavy, killing them. It is like the country's law. If anyone betrays our inside to the government, we slaughter that guy's whole family. However, if captured by the government and punished alone without confessing, we take good care of his wife and children. So Great Master Wonhyo should become our ally once you leave here. Otherwise, we will follow you anywhere to take revenge. Once the general's order is given, there is no escape. Piri glared at Wonhyo with threatening eyes. Well, even I, F the bandit horde, all stick together. Could they touch a single sleeve of Wonhyo's robe? Ha ha. Wonhyo laughed loudly. At Wonhyo's words, Piri's face changed color. His lips trembled blue. Don't brag. I hear Wonhyo's fame vibrates through the world, but in our eyes you look like nothing but a beggar monk. If you beg, please save me, maybe, but if you make a mistake, you won't cross this pass alive. Cutting the throat with a sword instantly is a light punishment. We could bury you alive, skin you alive, and dismember you. Since the master's body is big and has much flesh, we could roast you whole on a wood fire for drinking snacks, and if worse, your wife and children in front of your eyes. Piri stopped talking abruptly. While Piri was saying this, Wonhyo was staring blankly at Piri's face, and when Piri stopped talking, Wonhyo laughed dumbfoundedly and said, Well, will it be that easy? And he poked Piri's side with his hand. Piri flinched and twisted his body, glaring at Wonhyo. Why do you poke a person? Because you say such childish things. It's cute. Wonhyo then lifted Piri's chin with his palm. Piri tilted his head back, following Wonhyo's hand. When Piri felt he could not resist the strength of Wonhyo's hand, a kind of fear arose. Somehow his body seemed to shrink and Wonhyo's body seemed to grow, and he couldn't help the oppressive feeling of that sky-touching body pressing down on him. However, Piri hated to surrender easily to Wonhyo. An urge to thoroughly trick Wonhyo surged up. Piri tried to remove Wonhyo's hand from his chin, but Wonhyo's arm was like an iron bar, and Piri's strength could do nothing. Ugh, ungentlemanly. Piri glared at Wonhyo. Stop banditry. Why does a person of your caliber act as a bandit's minion when there is a mountain of work to do in the world? If you stop banditry even now, I will treat you well. But if you still don't fix it, this time you will really pay for it." Saying this, Wonhyo sat Piri upright. Piri barely escaped Wonhyo's hand, assumed dignity, stroked down his beard, and said, "Stop that bragging. Having come this far, life and death depend on my hand. What will you do? Do you know what awaits Wonhyo now? Seeing just one of them, you will tremble. Why the big talk?" Piri boasted like this. "What awaits me? Tell me." Wonhyo smiled broadly. "First, dignity with spears and swords like stars. Next, a torture rack for flogging and twisting legs. And next, a cave swarming with centipedes and snakes. Haha, there really are strange things. Anything else? A big cauldron with boiling water. Right, to boil people. I don't know how many arrogant monks have been boiled in that cauldron." "I see. What's next? Since Great Master Wonhyo is a famous monk, we'll put you on a woodpile." "What does that mean? Don't monks like burning? Since Great Master Wonhyo has high virtue, if cremated, many sarira will come out." "Right, burn me and steal my sarira." "Ha ha ha!" Wonhyo held his belly and laughed. "Why laugh? No matter how great Wonhyo is, if put on a woodpile and set on fire, you burn. Is there any other way?" Piri smacked his lips resentfully. "Well, we have to see who burns. If heaven is old, Wonhyo will burn, and if heaven is still in its right mind, the bandit horde will pay. Anyway, let's go. I must meet your boss and talk. What use is wrangling with a minion like you?" Wonhyo stood up first and went down the pass toward the boss's house. Piri followed behind, feeling awkward. "Tsk! I've never seen such a brazen guy in the world." Piri muttered so Wonhyo could hear. Water sounds and bird sounds were loud. Thinking of banditry in this beautiful scenery, instead of thinking of cultivating the way. Wonhyo looked back at Piri and shouted loudly. There was a big well. The stones piled for the well were covered beautifully with moss, showing it was a well several hundred years old. "Oh, a nasty spring. A spring that causes bandit minds." Wonhyo tapped the well curb with his staff. A booming sound rose from the well, and the water boiled up. "Until sentient beings who drink this water change their minds and enter the Buddha way, do not produce a spring again." Wonhyo hit the water with the tip of his staff again. Flames flashed, and the well dried up completely. Piri watched this spectacle dumbfounded. "Don't stand blankly. Go in first and announce that I have come." Wonhyo pointed at Piri with the staff burning with flames. Piri stepped back a few steps as if fearing the staff. Passing the well, there was a stable with dozens of fine horses tied up, and then a high gate. Wonhyo thought the reason the gate wasn't flung open was that it was a bandit's house. The house was very old, and the bases of some pillars were rotten. Shortly after Piri entered, a side door opened. "Come in this way." It was not Piri, but a stranger. He wore blue clothes, seemingly a servant. Wonhyo shouted at the blue-clothed one. "Is there a custom of welcoming a guest through a side door? Tell them to open the main gate." The voice rang loudly through the whole neighborhood. Princess Yosok and Asaga, confined in the rear garden annex, heard Wonhyo's voice. "Princess, it is the monk," Asaga shouted. It is the monk." The princess and Asaga hugged each other and cried. At this strange sight, Solchong cried, "Wah!" The sound of Solchong crying was also heard by Wonhyo. Asaga's brother also ran over and shouted, "The monk has come." "He has come, but how will the monk escape this bandit's lair alone?" The princess was glad but worried. "Princess, do not worry. The monk is an extraordinary person, so I believe he will surely win." Asaga wiped her tears and comforted the princess. "Indeed, the master is extraordinary, but if he demands you and me and the monk refuses, surely those guys will harm the monk. I hear they built a wood pile, are boiling an oil cauldron, and put poisonous snakes in a cave." The princess said this. "Still, the monk is a person heaven knows, a person Buddhas and Bodhisattvas protect." Asaga tried to comfort herself more than the princess with these words. "If the monk is harmed because of us too, what will you do, Asaga?" The princess asked this. "Decisively, the monk will win." Asaga shook her head confidently. "How do you believe that?" The princess showed an uneasy look. Asaga bowed her head briefly, as if shy, then said, "They say the hardest thing for a person to overcome is affection between man and woman, but though I was alone with the monk for 3 days and nights at Angadang, the monk's mind did not move even a hair's breadth, And finally, when this body clung to the monk asking to bear a son, he was unmoved and said, "You become the mother of this Buddha world. Isn't such a person one who will not burn in fire nor drown in water?" And she lowered her head again as if ashamed. "Really? Asaga, was it so?" The princess looked at Asaga with a smiling face, as if all doubts were finally resolved. Magpies and crows chattered loudly. The main gate opened and Wonhyo entered through it. Indeed, in the wide yard, dozens of soldiers stood in rows with drawn spears and swords. Wonhyo dragged his staff and walked steadily through the soldiers' spears and swords. Flames were still burning fiercely at the tip of the staff, emitting smoke. The soldiers closed their eyes at the smoke. Bahram, wearing a red dragon robe, a dark pink belt, a gold hat string, and carrying a sword wrapped in tiger skin, came down the stairs to meet Wonhyo. He had a white beard, a reddish face with a smile, looking like a very dignified general. However, there was a red aura in his two eyes. Killing intent. He certainly did not have the appearance of a rough warrior, but looked like a noble. Let's see what this person is useful for, Wonhyo thought inwardly. Piri looked lackluster standing beside Bahram. Since the master has visited such a humble, remote place from a long way, the mountains and rivers all radiate light. Bahram gave the first greeting like this. Wonhyo looked at Bahram and replied, "I regretted that these good mountains and rivers became a bandit's lair instead of a practitioner's sanctuary. But now seeing the general, it is even more pitiful that such a fine appearance became a bandit boss instead of a loyal general of the country." Bahram put one foot up on the floor, then put it down again, saying, "Look here, even so, coming to someone's house for the first time, is that something to say?" And he glared at Wonhyo. Wonhyo also put the foot he had placed on the floor back down and said with a straight face, "Since my teacher Sakyamuni Buddha taught not to steal and not to lie, my mouth has forgotten how to tell lies." "Still, isn't there propriety?" Bahram protested once more. "Straight mind is Buddha, Jiksim's bull. Being straight is propriety," Wonhyo answered. Bahram immediately made a smiling face and showed admiration, saying, "The master is indeed a man of the way. Straight mind is Buddha. Straight mind is Buddha." However, his trembling lips could not hide his resentment. Bahram had never heard such offensive words in his life. Yet, making a smiling face and preserving the host's dignity was his skill honed over a long time. In the main hall, a mirror was placed in the center, and seats for host and guest were arranged east and west. "Master, sit." Bahram pointed to a silk cushion. By national law, commoners could not even wear silk clothes, let alone a silk cushion. The bandit group stood outside national law. They lived defying national law. "Where does a monk sit on a silk cushion?" Wonhyo pushed the cushion aside and sat on the wooden floor. "While sitting on beautiful women's laps, what's wrong with sitting on a silk cushion?" Bahram laughed. "You are right." Wonhyo bowed his head as if embarrassed. "That is why you became a rule-breaking monk." Piri, sitting in the lower seat, smiled broadly as if avenging all grudges and sarcastically said, "Even great Master Wonhyo has times he surrenders. One does not discard words because of the person, bull, I, and peon, even if it is a bandit's word. If it is right, how can I not surrender?" Wonhyo answered like this. And he felt anew how a fault once committed followed the body like a shadow, obscuring the body's light and reducing its power. Eventually, tea was served. Two pretty servant girls in purple clothes were attending. The teacup was jade from Mount Gumo with a bluish tint. Wonhyo drank the tea as offered. The fragrance was subtle. Very good tea. Wonhyo praised it while putting down the cup. Dried persimmons and raw chestnuts were placed. Wonhyo accepted and ate them one by one as the servant girl offered. Bahram suddenly asked this, "Knowing this is a bandit's lair, do you eat the food we serve with such peace of mind?" Wonhyo licked the persimmon powder on his hand and said, "It is said one avoids the suffering of hell by the merit of offering to a disciple of Buddha once. Can I reject an offering that sinful sentient beings offer with effort?" And he licked even what was on his lips. "What if there is poison in it?" The sarcastic look disappeared from Bahram's face. "A bodhisattva treats sentient beings with the mind of loving an only child, Choya Iljaji. Would one suspect an offering given by a beloved only child? I lured the master here to kill you and take your wife and concubine. Would you still eat any food with peace of mind?" Baram feigned innocence and said this: "A bodhisattva does not suspect sentient beings, and even if sentient beings offer poison, that poison cannot harm the bodhisattva." Wonhyo answered like this. Baram ordered the servant girl, "Bring that jar." 2 servant girls brought out a jar each. "Open that jar," Baram commanded. The servant girls untied the oiled paper seal and opened the lid. A fishy smell came out. "Master, look at this." Baram picked up a human ear from the jar with chopsticks and showed it to Wonhyo. "These are the ears of guys who didn't listen to instructions. Among them are several monks' ears. Perhaps Great Master Wonhyo's big ears will also have to be put in this jar if you don't listen to me." He said this and laughed. Piri laughed delightedly from the side. Wonhyo looked at Baram's and Piri's ears and clicked his tongue, saying, "What to do with ears that don't listen to the bodhisattva's correct teachings? Cutting off the earlobes to pickle them is a light matter. Life after life they become earless ghosts, earless beasts, and after paying the suffering of Asamkhya Kalpas, even if born as humans, they will be earless people." Baram and Piri opened their eyes round in surprise and pricked up their ears. The ear in Baram's hand fell back into the jar. Well, we shall see. Baram revived and picked up a cut-out human lip from the second jar with chopsticks and said, "Do you know what this is? These are the mouths of those who lied or reported our affairs to the government office. Maybe Great Master Wonhyo's mouth will also go into this jar. You might escape King Yama, but you cannot escape our hands. Even if you go 1,000 or 10,000 li, we will find that mouth. Among these are many mouths of monks who deluded the world with empty words. What do you think of this?" And he thrust the chopsticks before Wonhyo's eyes. Wonhyo smiled broadly and said, "There are 4 sins committed by the mouth: false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, and flowery speech. If the sin committed by the mouth is light, the lips are dark blue, teeth uneven, and the mouth smells bad. If heavier, speech is unclear, and one cannot taste food. Finding no appetite, no matter how good the food. If heavier, one becomes mute, and if heavier, one receives the retribution of hell, hungry ghost, or animal. But the heaviest and scariest among sins committed by the mouth is saying there is no cause and effect and slandering the Buddha way. Cutting out such mouths to make pickles is truly a light matter. Do not bring the day when you regret resentfully, saying it would have been fortunate if your mouths had become mouths of shit-eating dogs." At Wonhyo's words, Baram's face turned pale, his hands trembled, and he dropped the chopsticks he was holding. Piri stood up, took down a sword hanging on the wall, and drew the frost-like blade. He intended to strike Wonhyo upon Baram's order. "Stop, stop!" Baram changed back to a composed attitude and raised his hand to stop Piri. Piri glared at Wonhyo once, sheathed the sword, and boasted, "Would a sword not enter Wonhyo's neck? Would that sword cut Wonhyo's neck?" Wonhyo laughed as if it were funny. Piri drew the sword he had half-sheathed again and struck down at Wonhyo. However, before he knew it, Piri's wrist was caught in Wonhyo's hand, and the sword was already in Wonhyo's hand. Wonhyo released Piri's wrist and gave the sword back to Piri, saying, "Is there a rule to strike a seated person by surprise with bare hands? Unmanly." Baram rebuked Piri. "I said hang the sword back." Piri took the sword from Wonhyo and panicked. Even if he struck Wonhyo again, it seemed he would only be humiliated again. He trembled with anger and shame. Wonhyo watched Baram's reaction, but Baram was calm. Wonhyo handed the sword to Piri and aimed slightly at Baram, but Baram did not blink an eye. Wonhyo thought Baram was not a figure comparable to Piri. Piri sheathed the sword and hung it on the wall. Piri was confident that he lost to no one in swordsmanship, so he was resentful that he could be defeated so easily by Wonhyo. Was there really an invisible Vajra warrior guarding Wonhyo's side? He thought so. It was surprising that a well over 1,000 years old boiled up, flamed, and dried up instantly, but that could be considered magic. However, seeing Wonhyo block with bare hands the sword Piri struck with full force, not only block but the sword that was in his hand passed to Wonhyo's hand before he knew when it was taken. Piri felt dizzy and covered his neck with both hands. It was because it seemed the sword in Wonhyo's hand would surely fall on his neck. But when Wonhyo released the wrist he held and gave the sword back, Piri was more afraid than having his head cut off. How could he be so calm? How could such guts exist? Piri was bewildered. Bahram ordered tea to be served again. The servant girls, who stood trembling in a corner at the unexpected big disturbance, seemed to come alive and served steaming tea again. This time, sesame snacks and pine pollen snacks were served as tea accompaniments. It was to make him suspect poison even more. Not only that, Bahram personally opened a packet and mixed white powder into Wonhyo's tea. Then he said, "It is arsenic powder. They say it becomes medicine if you eat it and don't die." Wonhyo drank that tea calmly as before. Seeing that, Bahram sighed long once. He had tested many monks, but he saw such a calm person for the first time. Bahram secretly felt respect for Wonhyo. He is a person I cannot handle. When this thought arose, Bahram quickly swept it away. It felt too much like trampling himself. He was someone who had lived 60 years with pride like a king. He had trained enough to be confident he wouldn't flinch even if a thunderbolt fell on his head. It was difficult to discard that body and mind tempered hundreds and thousands of times in a single morning. Moreover, Bahram had a big purpose. It was to make Princess Yosok and Asaga his own. Do not violate a married woman. Bahram could not violate the law of the bandit nation himself. Although they were bandits, they had a god they believed in. It was Asin, or Angasin. Asin is the god of empty space before creation. Asin is the god of darkness. Though empty, all things can come out from it. Asin's character fit the bandits' greed. There was another reason bandits believed in Angasin. Being empty space, it could not be cut by swords nor burned by fire. Bandits hope not to be harmed by swords or burn in fire. In ancient times, a certain Taoist gave the commandments of Angasin to bandits. If one violated these commandments, surely great punishment from Angasin would fall, and one would be eaten by tigers, the messengers of Angasin. Piri explained this law to Wonhyo. Therefore, to make Princess Yosok and Asaga his own, Wonhyo had to give permission to give his wife and concubine to Bahram, or otherwise, Wonhyo had to die so that Princess Yosok and Asaga became widows. They thought Asaga was Wonhyo's concubine. This was the big problem. Bahram first saw Princess Yosok when she was crossing the Nakdong River ferry on her way to find Wonhyo. For a man who spent most of his life in mountains and rarely saw noble women, and who felt solitude at 60 with little future left, Princess Yosok's beauty was an unbearable attraction. Though the princess was over 30, her fully bloomed appearance attracted Bahram even more. "I will make that woman mine by any means." Looking at the flowing water of Nakdong River, Bahram swore this. He could soon know she was a princess and Wonhyo's wife. Even then, Bahram was with Piri. "Look here, I cannot calm my mind," Bahram said to Piri. In fact, Piri also fell for the princess. Any man would be entranced seeing Princess Yosok's beauty, but for them, who had vitality like wild beasts and lived doing whatever they wanted, even risking their lives, they had never suppressed desires rising in their minds. For them, killing people or stealing others' things was a common occurrence. "It's the princess," Piri said to Bahram. "Is there a reason it can't be done because she is a princess? Being a princess makes me covet her more." Bahram said this. The image of the princess in fresh summer clothes was stuck in his eyes and wouldn't leave. "Then what will you do?" Piri asked. "Devise a scheme. Use any scheme to bring the princess into the main room of my house." Bahram ordered Piri like this. To Piri, this was a painful task, because Piri could not fight with Bahram over the princess. Piri had to strive to make the woman he liked Bahram's. It was a dull and stifling matter, but as Bahram's subordinate, Piri had no choice. "Well, there are two difficulties in this matter," Piri said to Bahram. "What? First, if we touch the princess, we will face suppression by government troops. And the other? Second, since Princess Yosok is Wonhyo's wife, touching a married woman will bring heavenly punishment." Piri looked at Bahram. He hoped he would give up if possible. Bahram nodded his head. Piri took this opportunity to mention an even more difficult reason to make him give up. "Even if we can avoid government troops, can we avoid heavenly punishment?" Bahram nodded again. Bahram was not originally a bandit either. He was truly the only son of King Jimpyong. King Jimpyong had no son until old age, only a daughter, Queen Seondeok. But Bahram was a son born between King Jimpyong and Nana, the daughter of a farmer named Garam. The reason is as follows. King Jimpyong hunted on the eastern slopes of Mount Tohamsan with a few retainers. It was early autumn. The king, riding a white horse with his white beard fluttering in the wind, chased a pair of deer. The deer, driven by arrows and spears, ran toward the sea. When the king's horse reached a stream, he discovered a maiden peeling and washing hemp in the water. She was a village maiden wearing coarse hemp clothes and barefoot, but the beauty of her face and body attracted the king. Seeing the king approach, Nana rolled down her sleeves, knelt on her left knee on the ground, and bowed her head modestly. The king ordered an attendant to ask where the maiden's house was and to lead him there. Hearing these words, Nana briefly lifted her eyes to look up at the king. Those eyes, the king decided inwardly. Sad, yet shy eyes shook the king's heart. Though the king was passionate, he loved Nana not only out of passion. Lamenting having no son, he also held a hope that perhaps a son might be born from such a pure maiden's body. The maiden was slowly wringing the hemp she washed in water. "It is the king's order. When will you be doing that? Leave it and lead the way." At the attendant's urging, the maiden did not hesitate and said, "Hemp given by the sun god, hemp to offer to the king." She wrung it all, put it in a wooden bowl, carried it on her head, and led the way. Hearing Nana's words and seeing her actions, the king could not suppress his longing heart even more. The maiden's house was by the stream at the mountain foot. Seeing the king come, Nana's father Garam was flustered and swept the yard, cleaned the room, and changed into new clothes with his wife and sons. "It is not a place fit for his majesty to enter. I am awestruck." Garam knelt before the horse. The king slept at Garam's house that night. Nana washed her body, washed her hair, put on new clothes, and attended the king's bed. However, Nana's face had a shadow of worry and no light of joy. The king was sad about that. "Nana, yes, I am so happy to meet you. Why do you not rejoice?" "I am awestruck." Nana bowed her head deeply. "Is there another man your heart is set on?" "Growing up in the mountains, I have never met strange men, so how could there be a man I am set on?" "Then is it because this body is old that you do not rejoice?" The king thought of his white hair and felt sorrowful. He felt that such a young maiden existed for a young bachelor, and for an old man to pluck her was sinful. Nana dropped tears from her bowed face. To hide the tears, Nana quickly covered her face with her sleeve. "Nana, speak straight. Do not fear. Speak what is in your heart. Becoming a king, would I steal the will of an innocent subject? Nana, seeing your tears, this body feels sorrow. Don't do that. Speak your mind." The king's words were gentle. Being the owner of the country, he felt helpless about a girl's heart. "I have committed a capital sin by making you see tears rudely. It is overwhelming enough for a humble body to attend the Supreme One, and looking up for even an hour is awe-inspiring. How much more so since you regard me prettily? The grace is immeasurable, and I do not know what to do. However, thinking that attending the Supreme One is only for this night, tears naturally spring up." Nana's answer surprised the king. Could a mountain woodcutter's daughter be like this? Indeed, he thought Silla was a good country, and the two sage kings Beofeng and Jinhong governed well, so the people believed in spirits and Buddhas and learned letters well. He was inwardly satisfied that this was the result of King Jinpyong striving for cultural development following the late king's will since his accession. However, at Nana's words, attending only for this night, the king could not help but feel a prick in his heart. In old times, a king could have several concubines, but since King Beofeng, Buddhism was revered, making it difficult. Even if he loved Nana, bringing her into the palace was difficult. Speaking by conscience, it was right for the king to leave Nana's room, but the king's desire did not allow it. How could it be only one night? "If you bear a son, I will make him the crown prince." He made this promise to Nana. "I am awestruck, but please give me a token." The king stood up readily, took down the sword hanging on the wall, and gave it to Nana. It was a treasured sword in a paulownia scabbard inlaid with gourd flowers and gourds in gold. "This is a treasured sword this body has loved and carried all my life. I give this as a token." Nana knelt and received the sword given by the king's own hand, held it above her head, drew the blade, and examined it in the candlelight. A blade clear as a mirror. Nana sheathed the blade, hung it on the wall, and said, "Your Majesty, this body will attend your Majesty life after life." And she allowed her body. The king's joy that night was unparalleled. It seemed not a waste to give away half the country. The early autumn night was not long. Before the king could close his eyes, the rooster crowed. The next morning, the king left Nana's house. He had promised to bring Nana into the palace by any means. Thus, Bahram was born. He is clearly King Jimpyong's son. However, there was no news from the king again. Nana raised Bahram alone. King Jimpyong passed away and Queen Sondeok ascended the throne. Nana never told Bahram that he was the king's son, only telling him his father was a certain hunter. Then, on the night she heard news of King Jimpyong's passing, Nana called Bahram, showed him the sword the king gave as a token, and told him the truth. And that night, Nana stabbed her neck with the king's sword and died. Ending this life with the sword my Lord gave, I will become a soul and follow the Lord I could not attend in life. She wrote this song and placed it by her pillow. Bahram buried his dead mother, wrapped the treasured sword, carried it, and went up to Seoul. By then, Queen Sondeok had already ascended. Bahram grew up not knowing his father all his life. When he knew who his father was, that father was already not of this world and seemed like his mother's enemy and his own enemy. Bahram's sorrow, unable to not consider the father whose blood he received as an enemy, was unparalleled. Bahram resented his father, cursed the palace, and entered a bandit's cave. Nearly 30 years had passed since then. In that time, he, a body meant to be king of Silla, became the king of the bandit nation. Bahram had never told anyone his history. He thought there would be no one to hear the secret of his body and his life. The unification of Silla bandits, as it is now, was after Bahram became general. He possessed the leadership of a prince. He tried all training except Buddhism. There was no training he didn't do, like swordsmanship. He liked Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi, and cherished Lizi and Sunzi. He researched hygiene arts and practiced immortality methods like absorbing qi, regulating breath, and gathering essence. His joy was keeping his body healthy, filling his appetite and sexual desire to his heart's content, thoroughly punishing those he hated, and doing whatever he wanted to the end. He had no desire for wealth and honor. For a while at first he had ambition to regain the king's position, but gradually even that became bothersome. He hated aging, but white hair came. He grew a beard like his father King Jimpyong, and it turned white early. No matter how much he practiced hygiene, he couldn't help everything declining once over 50. Stability decreased and all energy decreased. The only thing that didn't decrease and grew more vigorous was sexual desire. Princess Yosok and Asaga caught his eye. No matter what, he wanted to put these two women in his bosom. Only this matter occupied Bahram's mind for the past half-year. Even if we can avoid government troops, can we avoid heavenly punishment? Piri's words tormented Bahram. Bahram believed in the void god, healing, and the sun and moon gods. The void god became wind and always watched his body. It became breath, going in and out of his body, watching even his stomach. By day it became the sun, by night the moon and stars to watch this body. Mosquitoes and flies were also messengers and incarnations of the void god. There was nowhere the god's eyes didn't shine and nowhere his hand didn't reach. Bahram believed this. Bahram wanted to resist all forces in human affairs and felt he could, but he felt more and more that he could not resist the god's power. Seeing white hairs on his head and beard and all vitality declining, he believed how strict and powerful the void god's law was, so human power could not violate or resist it even an inch. I can do anything I want in my heart, but I cannot go against the god's will. This was Bahram's sorrow, resignation, and also conviction. In reality, nothing seemed difficult for Bahram. His subordinates regarded him as a god. They believed the void god sent mountain spirits and dragon spirits to protect him always, so arrows and swords wouldn't pierce his body. Nothing failed when he gave an order. Moreover, he was strict with subordinates, but also deeply compassionate. He didn't keep stolen wealth except for his own use, distributing it all to subordinates and giving the remainder to the poor and pitiful. When saving someone, he did it without the recipient knowing. If someone starved, he threw grain into their house at night, and if a village was in distress from famine, he put dozens of sacks of rice in front of the village at midnight and shouted, "Share it evenly." Angung. Angung means son of the void god. However, people knew this was Bahram's work. If a village had much disease, Baram sent doctors and medicine. He treated the disease for days, pretending to be a passing doctor before leaving. If there was someone receiving resentment from the people, he shot an arrow with pheasant feathers into that house at midnight. When the arrow flew in with a purr sound, the family trembled. If that person still didn't perform atonement, like returning stolen wealth, another arrow flew in. Receiving 2 arrows, they usually performed atonement. However, if they still didn't listen, he surely set fire to the house, or 1 or 2 family members died without knowing when, according to the severity of the sin. In this case, the young woman and wealth of the house were taken completely. The wealth and women taken this way were distributed to subordinates. Even if they fled elsewhere after receiving 2 arrows, it was useless. Even if they entered the center of Seoul and guarded inside and out with soldiers, they could not avoid Baram's punishment. Their trademark was drawing a black circle with ink on the wall or door of the perpetrator's house. This is the void god's sign. Black circle. This was extremely terrifying. Yokjiasu Muneo-hyosa was also a phrase written inside a black circle. Inside the circle, the crime was usually written. Baram did not mind killing cruelly when killing people. Baram, who did not believe in life after death, believed it was fair to make the person he considered evil suffer pain and distress equal to what they gave others before dying, and believed it served as a warning to others. For this, he sometimes dragged them into the mountains. Baram did not consider this a sin. He believed this was carrying out the way on behalf of heaven, Che Cheonheng Do. He thought by doing this, he was doing the king's work that he should have been doing. Some captives preached benevolence and righteousness to Baram. Then Baram pointed to the wall. There a frame read, "The great way does not arise, Daido Bulbal." This flips Laozi's, when the great way is abandoned, benevolence and righteousness appear. How can the great way be abandoned? The benevolence and righteousness you speak of are made for your convenience, not the great way of heaven and earth. He scolded. If he caught monks, Baram tortured them, saying, "You rascals, not plowing or weaving, eating well and dressing well in high buildings, aren't you clearly thieves?" If he caught scholars or monks who lived idly, Baram tested them like this, and if they had no worthy points, he forced them to do hard labor or killed them, judging, "You rascals, useless ones in the world. You rascals, horses and oxen carry loads, dogs watch houses, cats catch mice, even pigs can be eaten. Fellows like you are useless for anything and only waste food and cloth, so you deserve to die." Few monks or scholars could answer this capable. Once great Master Dayan was captured. Baram threatened as usual, this obvious thief. "Ha ha," Dayan laughed. "Why laugh?" Baram was angry. "What would I steal? Wearing discarded rags, eating swill dregs, living in a cave, what would I steal?" At Dayan's answer, Baram stood up and bowed. Dayan received Baram's bow, stood upside down, and kicked his legs in the air. "Master, what is that?" Baram asked politely. "I'm returning your bow lest receiving it without price becomes a debt." Baram was dumbfounded. "What is the way?" Baram asked Dayan about the way. Dayan looked at Baram blankly, shouted, "Ikeu," wrapped his head with both hands and ran away. Baram stopped his subordinates from chasing, and he admired, a real man of the way. But Baram didn't know what Dayan's running away meant, nor did he try to know deeply. When luring Wonhyo this time, Baram had a kind of curiosity. Skinning Wonhyo, cutting his limbs, or frying him in boiling water was not difficult. Before taking action, he wanted to test Wonhyo this way and that to make it an interesting pastime. However, seeing Wonhyo, he seemed too much for Baram to handle. Baram was slightly anxious because of this. Baram thought he must settle the Princess Yosok matter before being further suppressed by Wonhyo. Seeing the master is a cool-headed hero, without beating around the bush, I will speak straight. Baram changed the subject. "What is it? Try speaking." Wonhyo licked all the dried persimmon off his lips and smacked them. He thought the taste was very sweet. "So, I will listen to whatever you say, so give me some more persimmons. Those persimmons taste quite good." Wonhyo swallowed saliva. "Hey, bring more persimmons." Baram ordered the servant girl. "So what is it?" This time Wonhyo urged. Whatever Baram said seemed likely to be interesting, though I think you guess without me saying, "Give me Princess Yosok and a saga." Baram cut to the chase. "I can't do that." Wonyo refused without hesitation. Bahram's face changed suddenly. Why can't you? Bahram opened his mouth after a while. Can I change the vow made to become husband and wife for life after life, even postponing becoming a Buddha for this life to be the last? That won't do. Isn't it so? It won't do? It won't. Wonyo picked up a newly served persimmon and ate it deliciously. If the master dies, the princess becomes a widow, right? Bahram asked. If the husband dies, she is a widow. Wonyo spat out a seed. Then shall I try killing Wonyo? Bahram smiled broadly. A terrifying will was visible in that smile. It was like his whole body twisting once. The murderous and cruel energy inside Bahram squirmed. Even if you kill me, the princess and Asaga won't become yours. Wonyo picked up another persimmon. Why? Bahram glared at Wonyo, eyes wide. Because your hand can't reach. Wonyo chewed the persimmon and spat seeds into his hand. Piri was scared Wonyo might perform some scary magic with those seeds. Hand can't reach? Bahram stretched his neck and leaned back. Can't reach. Why? Because one side is too high and one side is too low. Who is high and who is low? Bahram's voice grew louder. The princess and Asaga are above the sky, and you are a hungry ghost under that hell. You should kneel before the feet of the princess or Asaga and beg, save me. Eventually it will be so, because the immeasurable compassionate hearts of the princess and Asaga will pity the pitiful greedy sentient being Bahram, like a young child trying to jump into fire. Not knowing there is a benefactor beside you trying to save you, thinking of evil schemes that won't work, it is pitiful. You seem to think you lured me, but am I a person to be lured by you? You must know I'm a messenger of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come to save the bandit horde entering hell. As Wonyo finished speaking, Bahram shouted, Look here. Is that oil cauldron boiling? Boil this monk talking nonsense whole in the oil cauldron. Boil him until his bones are mushy. There are so many guys talking big and lying in the world that the people cannot come to their senses. Let's see if he still talks nonsense sitting in a boiling oil cauldron. At these words, soldiers holding spears and swords standing outside rushed in. However, they hesitated, daring not touch Wonyo. Can't you drag this monk to the oil cauldron? Bahram stamped his foot and shouted. Come on, get up! A soldier rushed in and pulled Wonyo's arm. As Wonyo was pulled up by the soldier, he loudly called, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. The booming voice rang in all directions. Humph. Let's see if your Avalokitesvara freezes ice in the oil cauldron. If you come out alive without dying in the oil cauldron, I will become your disciple too. Bahram got up and went out, saying, Look here, you, call Princess Yosok. Tell her to come see Great Master Wonyo being boiled in the oil cauldron. Tell her to smell to her, fill the smell of her unforgettable Great Master Wonyo being fried in the oil cauldron. Let's see if Buddha wins or Anga Sin wins. Bahram said this and went to Angadang in the rear garden. One body servant girl followed Bahram, and one girl went to Princess Yosok's quarters. Bahram opened the door to Angadang. The door was painted blue, pillars red, rafters with wave patterns, and walls and ceiling were all painted. A blue dragon on the east wall, a white tiger on the west, a black turtle on the north ceiling, a red bird on the south, and on the north wall hung a painting of a beautiful goddess with a water jar in front. This is Asen, the void god. Beside the goddess was a well with clear spring water rising. The goddess meant giving birth to all things in heaven and earth. The spring symbolized the goddess's virtue, feeding all things with endless water, and the round jar symbolized the void before the birth of all things, with the water inside representing the god's function. The servant attending Bahram offered clean water on a small table. Bahram personally placed the water bowl before the god and bowed 3 times. Let me win. Let me beat Wonyo and beat Buddha. If I win, I will slaughter a whole cow and offer it as a sacrifice. However, if I cannot beat Wonyo today, I will burn down the shrine. Making this invocation, Bahram prayed until his palms were hot. Bahram struck the flint. The crescent-shaped steel hit the flint, making a sharp sound and sending red sparks. But for some reason, the fire did not catch well on the tinder. The tinder was made of dried leaves of Cinereus deltoides from deep mountains, rubbed into soft cotton, mixed with rubbed yellow tender leaves of mugwort, picked at noon on Dano Day. Bahram was anxious that only sparks flew, and the tinder didn't catch fire. The divination was that if tinder caught fire well, transferred to an oil-soaked paper wick, and then to old pine resin wood, grown without hearing a rooster crow, to burn vigorously, the wish would be fulfilled. Who has the tinder taken offense at? Bahram worried inwardly but could not speak. Chills ran down Bahram's spine. His hair stood on end. What is this? Bahram looked at the goddess statue. The goddess seemed to be thinking deeply, eyes narrowed, arms folded as if bowing. This was Bahram, who didn't blink even if a sword entered his head. Wasn't this Bahram who killed people like flies? This was Bahram who tortured hated people with unspeakable cruelty while drinking. But why did chills run down his body? Bahram's hand striking the flint trembled and didn't listen well. The steel didn't hit the sharp flint edge properly. Oh, what's wrong? Bahram gathered his wits. Before Bahram's eyes, Wonhyo sitting in the oil cauldron appeared. Wonhyo sat calmly in boiling oil and seemed to shout, "Oh, this is cold. Put in more firewood quickly." Can that be? No matter how great a monk, once in the oil cauldron, he will be cooked like a parboiled octopus instantly. No, standing before the oil cauldron, he will surrender. Bahram struck the flint thinking this. Zip, countless sparks flew. Fire caught on the tinder. Yellow smoke of mugwort rose with fragrance. Done. Joy appeared on Bahram's face. Bahram blew on the paper wick against the tinder fire. A yellowish fire rose. Bahram lifted the resin wood to transfer the wick's fire. The resin caught fire, emitting fragrance. Like a butterfly released from confinement, the resin fire danced. Bahram was happy, but an ominous thing happened. The fire from the paper wick fell from his hand to his knee, and Bahram's clothes caught fire. While trying to put it out, the resin fire in one hand singed Bahram's beard. A burning smell arose. Ung. Bahram threw away the resin fire. The fire went out, and black smoke rising was terrifying. Bahram ran out of the shrine. Wrong, it went wrong. Bahram shouted unknowingly. The servant girl sat down on the ground helplessly. Why sit down? Bahram kicked the girl's side and knocked her over. The girl kicked by Bahram collapsed and couldn't get up. Bahram walked to where the oil cauldron was, not even looking, as if he had stepped on an ant. Bahram's mind surged like a sea in a storm. The flint not working, clothes and beard burning, all were ominous and unpleasant. Did Angusin abandon him, or was his fate exhausted? Such ominous thoughts flashed like lightning in the darkness. Even so, I will. Bahram ground his teeth. The god abandons me, abandon if you will. I will do it with my strength. I will dispose of Wonhyo with my strength. If he doesn't die in the oil cauldron, I'll put him in the snake pit. Let him be bitten by vipers and swell up like a bean pod and die. If he doesn't die in the snake pit, I'll burn him with fire. If I put him on a wood pile and set fire, will he not die? If he still doesn't die, with my sword, with one stroke. Bahram thought hurriedly. All these thoughts were instantaneous. The day was cloudy. It was late spring, early summer sleepy weather. A crow cawed from the old scholar tree. This scholar tree was unknown centuries old, and a big python was said to be inside its hollow. It was a tree worshipped as a god with straw ropes and white paper strips. Long ago, this tree was struck by lightning, so one side was broken and the burnt mark remained black. The crow crying on this tree was believed to be a messenger of the god attached there. Bahram counted the crow's cries. 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 4. Bahram stopped briefly as usual and tried divination with the number of crow cries. However, his mind was distracted and the hexagram didn't form well. Heaven and earth become the coffin, sun and moon become the lamps, crows and magpies become mourners, flies and maggots become pallbearers. Bahram thought of Zhuangzi's words. Ominous thoughts again. Bahram stomped and walked. This was also instantaneous. At this time, Princess Yosuk, Asaga, and Sasama were walking, dragged by the servant girl. Hearing the girl say, "Come see great Master Wonhyo being boiled in the oil cauldron," Princess Yosuk and Asaga were initially shocked to the point of fainting. But Sasama said forcefully, "Do not worry. Great Master Wonhyo is not an elder to die by a bandit's hand." Gaining composure at these words, the two women followed the girl to see how things would turn out. "I entrust the baby to you." The princess entrusted Solchong to the wet nurse like this. She had decided she would not see Solchong again. Princess Yosok decided to follow in death if she saw Wonhyo dying. Although all knives were taken, the princess thought of various ways to end her life without a knife. Asaga, for her part, decided to save Great Master Wonhyo by sacrificing herself if there was a way, and if not, to follow Great Master Wonhyo. Sasama also pondered ways to save Wonhyo. Though weaponless, he decided to use all his strength and talent, and if he couldn't save Wonhyo, to kill Baram to avenge Wonhyo. Thus the three followed the servant girl, each with their own resolution. Ah, Princess Yosok! Baram blocked the princess's path. Princess Yosok stared straight at Baram with a serious face without answering. Fire seemed to shoot from her eyes. Baram felt chills down his spine again. Baram forced a calm attitude and laughed with a mocking sound. Humph, today is the day Princess Yosok becomes a widow. I called you to smell the smell of that tall monk boiling in the oil cauldron. Princess Yosok shuddered at Baram's venomous eyes. We shall see. Sasama stepped in front of the princess and Asaga and shouted. At these words, Baram stopped walking. See what? Whether evil wins or good wins. Sasama glared at Baram. Sasama was sad and angry that he didn't have the strength to suppress this bandit yet. But thinking of biting Baram's throat to avenge Great Master Wonhyo in the worst case, he looked at Baram's neck. A young fellow not knowing his elder. Baram glared at Sasama and put his hand on the sword hilt at his waist. You rascal, move your rude mouth one more time. I will cut you in two with one stroke. Sasama did not succumb to Baram's threat. If you want to draw a sword, give me my sword. Isn't it unsightly for a big adult to fight a bare-fisted child with a sword? Really, if I give your sword, will you compete with me? Baram smiled broadly. Give me my sword. My sword is a loyal subject's sword, so it's a waste to smear a mere bandit's dirty blood, even to kill a strong enemy. But if you want to compete, let's try. At Sasama's calm and bold words, Baram's eyebrows twitched upward. Huh, that brat is cheeky. Baram started walking. Why go? Look here, why go? Sasama called Baram. Still, Baram pretended not to hear. Inwardly, Baram said he saw a child like Sasama for the first time. Baram had to admit that Wonhyo and Sasama were rare people in the world. Baram thought his subordinates were of a different breed from such heroes. Baram was confident in his own greatness. He had the pride of being a king's son, and anyone who came before him submitted or trembled in fear. If extremely bold, they lashed out, but Wonhyo's group neither submitted nor trembled nor lashed out. Rather, they seemed to look down on him and pity him. That attitude was unbearable to Baram. Those eyes looking down from high were hateful and even scary. I am a king's son, a person meant to be king. Thinking this made it more unpleasant. Sasama's eyes were that scary. Baram felt suppressed, feeling he couldn't endure if he gave Sasama the sword and fought. What is that power? What power gives even young Sasama and girl Asaga a dignity I cannot violate? Baram feared that power. Baram tried to suppress that power with his own, but it didn't work. After capturing Princess Yosok, he tried coaxing and threatening in various ways, but she remained unshaken. It would have been better if she resented him, but there wasn't even resentment. That made Baram endlessly anxious. It made Baram lose confidence in his own power. Today is the day to end it. The day to see if I lose or he loses. Baram thought this and moved his feet powerfully. At this time, Piri came to meet him. How did it go? Baram asked Piri. Wonhyo listens very well. Piri said this, glancing at Princess Yosok's party behind. Seeing Asaga, Piri's heart fluttered. How does he listen well? Says he surrenders? Baram opened his eyes wide. Surrender? Is Wonhyo a person to surrender to anyone? Piri stepped back a step, startled by Baram's burnt clothes and missing beard corner. What happened to that beard? Piri shouted. With one side of the beard missing, the face looked completely distorted. Ah, and those clothes too. Piri looked at the hole in Baram's coat. Piri was sad to see Baram's shameful appearance. No, if not surrender, in what way does Wonhyo listen well? Baram showed no leeway to think of beard or clothes. I told him to be bound, so he was bound. Piri sighed. Bound? No, you couldn't bind him by force, but bound him by begging the person? Baram glared at Piri. Piri snorted dumbfoundedly. Don't speak of it. If he didn't intend to be bound, do you know anyone to bind Wonhyo? Soldiers rushed in, but fire flared from Wonhyo's staff, so they all stepped back. And he laughed. Princess Yosok's party followed 3 or 4 steps behind. Couldn't you break that staff? Baram panted. It's a staff where hitting a well turns water to fire. Who would touch that staff? Huh, it's the end, the end. So where is Wonhyo now? Bahram clenched his fist, solidifying his resolve to put Wonhyo in the oil cauldron no matter what. He is standing by the oil cauldron. You bound him tight so he can't struggle? Tied hands and feet tight. Are the people all gathered? All the bosses are gathered. Bahram turned his head to glance at Princess Yoseok's party once, lift him quickly and put him in the oil cauldron. No matter how great Wonhyo is, unless his body is iron or stone, if he goes into boiling oil, he dies. Is there any other way? And he walked quickly. Well, I don't know if it will go as wished. Piri followed Bahram. What won't go as wished, man? Bahram looked back at Piri. Because Wonhyo is so calm. I was also watching to see what Wonhyo would do, but Wonhyo didn't budge, so I got scared and came out. Eek, scared of a bound man? Go see, but everyone is knocking their knees together, as if something big will happen, as if that burning staff will fly into the air and cause a great calamity. It is a staff that burns but does not consume itself. Piri showed a shivering appearance. Bahram hated hearing that too. The flint failing, clothes and beard burning, the crow crying on the scholar tree, all darkened Bahram's mind. But Bahram ground his teeth once. Whether he dies or I die, thinking inwardly, he exited the west gate. The place with the oil cauldron was a big house in the western forest. It served as warehouse and mill, and a large cauldron hung at one end. It was a big cauldron for boiling a whole cow. Whole logs burned vigorously in the large fire pit, casting flickering shadows in the gloom, and the smell of savory oil pierced the nose. 50 bosses stood around wearing swords, and minions surrounded the bound Wonhyo. Seeing Bahram come, the bosses drew their swords in unison and pointed the tips to the ground to show respect. Bahram pointed his sword tip to the sky to answer. It meant, I govern you. Then Bahram's eyes went to Wonhyo, standing 3 or 4 steps from the oil cauldron, hands behind back, ankles tied with hemp cloth, guarded by 4 soldiers. Wonhyo stood composedly, almost expressionless. His eyes were directed at Bahram. Bahram found it hard to handle Wonhyo's eyes. Those eyes pressed down with unbearable force. Bahram used all his strength not to lose to those eyes, but his eyes were powerless like frosted leaves. Bahram laughed loudly once to hide it. When that laughter rang in the quiet forest, Bahram felt goosebumps because his own voice didn't sound like his own. Caw, caw, caw! The crow cried again. Clouds broke and sunlight streamed. It was all a terrifying scene. So great Master Wonhyo? Still won't surrender? Bahram smoothed his voice to gather energy. His one-sided beard moved. A smile seemed to float on Wonhyo's face, but it soon disappeared and there were no words. If you ask to be saved even now, I will save you. If you write a pledge to give me Princess Yoseok and Asaga, I will save you. Bahram pointed at Wonhyo with his sword tip. Still, Wonhyo did not answer. At this time, Princess Yoseok, Asaga, and Sasama arrived. Princess Yoseok led, followed by Asaga, and Sasama followed behind. Sasama's eyes were full of spirit, eyes resolved to die. Even if all flashing swords here gathered on his body, he was determined to avenge his teacher. Princess Yoseok walked slowly, as if not seeing the people standing around with drawn swords, then stopped where Wonhyo's figure was visible. The princess seemed about to soar into the air or collapse. But in the next moment, she calmed down and looked at Wonhyo, thinking that if she saw Wonhyo die, she would follow in death the next moment. Her mind settled. Asaga differed from the princess. Seeing Wonhyo, she immediately knelt and put her palms together. And as if forgetting to rise, she just stared at Wonhyo. Sasama did the same as Asaga. Sasama wanted to run immediately and bite through the hemp rope binding Wonhyo, but seeing Wonhyo's gentle eyes even smiling broadly, directed at him, Sasama's tightly knotted venomous heart melted, and the thought, I will quietly follow the monk, arose. Now, this is the end. Bahram looked back at Wonhyo and Princess Yoseok. Great Master Wonhyo, this is the end. Surrender and live, or else die. Even if the Scylla King's words have a law to be retracted, my words once fallen cannot be turned even by the power of heaven. Will you offer Princess Yoseok and Asaga to me or not? Write a pledge. Look here, bring paper, brush, and ink. Untie Great Master Wonhyo and drag him here. Wonhyo was untied. A desk and writing implements were brought out. A soldier spread paper on the desk and gave the brush to Wonhyo. Everyone's eyes moved to Wonhyo's hand. The princess and Asaga were swallowing saliva. Wonhyo lifted the brush and rolled it in the inkstone to soak it thoroughly. Wonhyo lifted the brush as if to write on the paper while standing, then put down the brush and said, "Bring a mat! Bring a mat!" Bahram ordered as Wonhyo requested. A minion brought a straw mat and spread it on the ground. "Bring a cushion," Wonhyo ordered again. A cushion was brought as ordered. "Offer water for rinsing mouth and washing hands." Wonhyo ordered again. Water came as ordered. Wonhyo rinsed his mouth and washed his hands. After rinsing his mouth and washing his hands, Wonhyo sat cross-legged on the cushion and quietly closed his eyes. Bahram and the group were watching what Wonhyo was doing. Wonhyo opened his eyes again. "Offer incense and an incense burner," Wonhyo commanded, unbeknownst to whom. As soon as the words fell, a celadon incense burner and an incense box descended from nowhere and landed on the desk. Bahram and the group turned pale and stepped back. "Namu Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva." A sound rose. It was Princess Yosok and Asaga calling out in emotion. That sound gradually rose, seeming to fill the valley and the entire air. Wonhyo raised his hand, opened the incense box, picked up incense powder, and put it in the burner. Blue smoke rose in the shape of a dragon. Wonhyo opened his mouth wide and made a sound. It is the mantra of the letter A for all dharmas are originally unborn. It is a mantra to spit out all defilements in the mind. A mantra entering the Dharma gate that birth, living, and death are all illusions and do not originally exist. Next, Wonhyo called V. He called long. It is the mantra of V, water. Original nature is beyond words. On earth it becomes water, springs, streams, and oceans. Rising to the sky, it becomes mist and clouds. Again, it becomes dew, rain, frost, snow, and hail falling. When hot, it becomes invisible steam. When cold, it becomes hard ice. One cannot know which is its true nature. Humans are like that too, becoming a good person in the morning and an evil person in the evening, rejoicing and laughing now, then grieving and crying now. The hand that takes a sentient being's life immediately becomes the hand offering incense before spirits. It is a mantra entering the Dharma gate, knowing that the same mind becomes compassion, greed, love, and hate. Next, Wonhyo called Ra. The sound was clear and powerful. This is the mantra of Ra, fire, the mantra of pure and undefiled. Heaven and earth are originally pure. The mind of sentient beings is also originally pure. Like fire is clean, it is clean. The originally pure Dharma realm becomes dirty because the grime of ignorance of sentient beings sticks to it. Grime of evil karma, delusion from foolishness. It means falsity. Next, Wonhyo called with a very booming voice, Hum. It is the mantra of hum, wind. The mantra of cause and karma are like empty space. A Dharma gate knowing that although all things sentient beings do are like painting in empty space, cause and effect are nevertheless unerring. Wonhyo's mind was peaceful, solid like earth, free and unhindered like water, clean like fire, and unobstructed like empty space. Wonhyo saw a pure state experience for the first time in his life. The state of birth, death, and nirvana are like a dream, and the state of ascending the palace of liberation and purity. Wonhyo experienced this state only when facing death. Wonhyo forgot all about his current situation. He only saw the Buddha Dharma filling the Dharma realm. Wonhyo unknowingly put his palms together. Homage to all Buddhas of the 10 directions and 3 times, all honored Bodhisattvas and Mahasattvas Mahaprajnaparamita. It is all Buddha's grace. Wonhyo felt the Buddha's grace deep into his bones. He tasted the gratitude of the unsurpassed way thoroughly. A smile of conversion rose on Wonhyo's face. It was the bliss of Dharma. However, the next moment Wonhyo saw that even Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are all flowers in the sky, illusions, hard to arise and hard to extinguish. Empty, empty, silent, silent. Nirvana. Space and time burned away all at once. Only brightness remained. Forced to name it, it is perfect enlightenment brightness. A smile floated on Wonhyo's face again. It was returning from the boundary of Nirvana to the world of sentient beings. Wonhyo saw Bahram, the various bandits, Princess Yosok, Asaga, trees, and such things before his eyes. He felt they were all imperfect like newborn babies, yet cute, the compassion of loving an only child. Wonhyo felt the impulse to come out of the pure palace, enter among sentient beings, and suffer, grieve, and rejoice with sentient beings. He felt he must comfort all sentient beings, become them, their friend, their reliance, their light, and their way. He tasted the state of mind of Bhikshu Dharmakara's vow not to achieve Buddhahood until all sentient beings were saved without leaving one behind. Wonhyo lifted the brush. Bodhisattvas manifest in the world through transformation, not based on desire, but only out of compassion. To make them abandon desire, they borrow appearances of various desires and enter birth and death. Posal Byonhwa, Sihyon Segen. Biewi bon, Deni Jabi, Yongpisa Gajatam Yok, Ipsang Sa. As Wonhyo threw the brush after writing this, the remaining incense in the box burned by itself, fragrance filled the Dharma realm, and bright light emitted from Wonhyo's body. Baram closed his eyes gently, bowed his head lower and lower, knelt before Wonhyo, and sobbed. Other bandits also threw down their swords in unison and knelt. Princess Yosok also touched her forehead to the ground and cried. Asaga and Sasama did likewise. Only Piri stood rolling his eyes, not understanding the reason. The fire of the oil cauldron that was burning somehow went out, and the boiling oil cauldron became quiet with foam. It was a few days after that. Rumors spread in Silla capital that great Master Wonhyo was entering with the bandit boss Baram made into a disciple. Just on the 8th day of the 4th month, Buddha's birthday, a day when the whole capital was full of lanterns for the Lantern Festival, and children and adults filled the streets in new clothes, Wonhyo arrived in the streets of Seoul. He was bringing Baram, 50 bandit bosses, Princess Yosok, Asaga, and Sasama. Wonhyo took the lead with Princess Yosok, Solchong carried by the wet nurse, and Asaga, while Sasama wore a sword and dragged Baram and the 50 bandit bosses, whose hands and waists were tied with hemp ropes. Hundreds of beggars led by Uimyong met Wonhyo, bowed, and followed behind. Great Gakken Kim Yushin came out with his wife Princess Jijo to meet Wonhyo, and countless people lined the road to see this spectacle. Yushin dismounted in front of Wonhyo, and Princess Jijo also got off the palanquin to meet her elder sister Princess Yoseok. Wonhyo pointed to Baram and the 50 bandit bosses kneeling on the road and said, "These people repented their past sins and voluntarily came bound to receive punishment according to the country's law." And he also mentioned that Sasama and Asaga were descendants of the loyal subject Jang Chunrang. Yushin addressed Baram and the 50 bosses. "Your sins deserve death 10,000 times, but hearing that you received Great Master Wonhyo's salvation and seeing your intention, His Majesty ordered that if you swear to be loyal to the country from now on, he will not only forgive all sins but also use you for state affairs according to your talents, so know this." And he conveyed the king's command. Baram and the group bowed their heads. Baram received the treatment of a prince and became General Seodang, and other bosses also received military positions respectively. Several years later, when Silla attacked Baekje, the generals who fought bravely at the Battle of Hwangsan were these people, and it was the beggar troops who risked death to spy on the state affairs of Baekje and Goguryeo. Wonhyo hid in the mountains to cultivate the way and teach disciples, and Princess Yosok and Asaga became nuns following Wonhyo all their lives. End.